curious for you, you've talked a little bit about relationships of famous founders and entrepreneurs. Like, what have you found are the marriages or relationships like by the greatest entrepreneurs?
Marriages?
Yeah.
Terrible. They're terrible. I mean, there's very few people because you tend to be obsessed. Like, I also think like it's important to note. So the people that appear on Founders Podcasts, right? They were so good at their jobs that somebody wrote a book about their life. This is like the tiniest percentage of any humans that have ever existed. So of course they're like outliers of outliers. And what I would say is most people over optimize their professional life to the detriment of their personal life. And there's a great documentary on this called The Defiant Ones, which is one of my favorites. It's probably my second favorite documentary besides The Last Dance, if you're like an obsessive person. And I've probably watched The Defiant Ones at least 10 times. Jimmy Iovine, who many people would be surprised. They're like, of all the people you want to meet, who would you want to meet? And in my top 3, Jimmy Iovine was in there. It was James Dyson, Jeff Bezos, and Jimmy Iovine. And Dyson and Jeff Bezos makes perfect sense for somebody that, studies the history's greatest entrepreneurs. We're like, Jimmy Iovine, why? And I was like, you just got to watch The Defiant Ones because it's a great documentary. People think it's a documentary on the relationship and partnership between Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine. No, it's a documentary on entrepreneurship. They're just very entrepreneurial. And in that documentary, they interview Jimmy's ex-wife and they interview Dr. Dre's wife, who then they've since been divorced after that. And, they both talk openly, both of the women talk openly about how difficult it is to be married to people like this. And I think they can describe it better than anybody else because it's from the spouse's perspective. But it essentially comes from, you have usually highly disagreeable people, very driven people, obsessed people, have a hard time, taking a break, are dedicated. And you can't have a relationship if you're not, spending time with the other person and making them a priority.
Yeah. Do you think that entrepreneurship is a trauma response in some ways? Like it's like PTSD, and so you become an entrepreneur?
I actually have a lot of people, because when you think about these life stories, there's usually some kind of like unhappiness,
Yeah.
usually an issue with like their parents, like a relationship with the father is a big instigator. Maybe they grew up in poverty. I would just say that I don't think it's prerequisite for extreme success. It's just that most humans grow up in bad environments.
Hmm.
And so I think it's literally just a bigger sample size. You can, grow up in a loving household and still have extreme success. I don't know if it's a trauma response. I do think I have a different view of this. Like I hope, I was just talking to Toby Luque of Shopify about this. He said something interesting because I had a long form conversation with him for the new show. And he said at the very end, he's like, oh, me and you have the same job. Our job is to create more entrepreneurs. And I never thought about that because he was a fan of both founders, of the podcast founders too. And I would like to help entrepreneurs surface useful information for them, but I don't know if you can create more of them.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he could. I just think that there is something almost innate in it. It's like a personality. I don't think you choose to be an entrepreneur. I think like there's this great line from Jeff Bezos where he says, we don't choose our passions choose us.
Yeah.
That's how I kind of think about it. So I think even if that entrepreneur type didn't even have trauma, they still would do what they're doing. Like I'm an unmanageable person. There's no way I could ever work for somebody. I'd get fired. Like I just can't not say what's on my mind. Me and you are both control freaks. It's very obvious. We talk about this before recording.
Enthusiast, I like to say.
Yeah, exactly. I want to, pick what I work on, who I work with, how I work. These are just things that are incompatible with, with being an employee. So I didn't think there was an option, whether I had trauma in my childhood or not.
Yeah, I kind of think, I don't know if it's a story you tell yourself when you're an entrepreneur, but I do think I at least am unemployable now. And probably it seems to me like most of the greatest entrepreneurs, you actually would not want them as an employee. They might be incredible, but you might not. But I'm curious because you have a story. I think you're the one that I heard it from. It was about Steve Jobs and the founder of Atari.
I swear to God, that was on my mind just
Really?
now. I was literally going to bring this up.
Okay,
Yeah.
Tell us a story.
So there's an interesting thing that I'm very interested in these ideas that people that didn't know each other, lived at different times, worked in different industries, and in many cases, were in different parts of the world, arrived at similar conclusions.
Mm-hmm.
And this idea that I've now heard from a bunch of living entrepreneurs. So Daniel Ek, founder of Spotify, told me this. Kareem, founder of Ramp, told me this, that they hire for spikes. And their point was that, big corporations, the advantage that you have as like as a founder-led company is like big corporations kind of like manage to the middle. So they want you to look a certain way, act a certain way. There's just a lot more like structure around them. Where if you're a founder-led company, you have the authority that like, a non-founding CEO probably lacks. And so their whole thing is just like, I don't judge you by your worst idea. I judge you by your best. And usually if you want the most talented designer in the world or the most talented programmer in the world or the most talented X of anything in the world, they're going to be unusual people with very distinct personalities. And a lot of their personality types will usually lead to like bad behavior. And so like one example of this is like one of the best designers that Spotify ever had. And this is the early days of Spotify. It's like he was bipolar and also an alcoholic, but also the world's best designer. And if the CEO and the founder didn't sit next to him while he designed, if Daniel got up to go take a call or something else, they'd lose track of this guy for days. He would just like take off running. So he literally, people were telling Daniel, like, what are you doing? You're the founder of this company, your CEO. It's like, you can't just sit and babysit this guy. He's like, he's so talented. Yes, I do. It's a very high leverage, thing I'm doing right now, as opposed, and they knew it wouldn't last forever. It's not somebody's going to work with you for 20 years. And this is not new. It's like you'll see these characters in these books. And so I didn't know this until I read, I think I've done like 15 episodes on Steve Jobs by now. But one of the funniest things was Nolan Bushnell. A lot of people don't realize that in that time in Silicon Valley, this was probably 40 years ago, very common for founder starts a company, raises money, bring in professional management. There was very few of these like founders in their 20s left to run their companies. And Nolan was one of the first ones, and he was like 27. And he thought both Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak were very talented, but Steve was an eccentric. He would show up to the office barefoot. He was 19 years old, show up barefoot, refused to shower, I think at the time was only eating like a fruit diet. Like he just had a very extreme personality type. And then he only wanted to work at night. And he insisted that he could sleep in the office. And everybody's telling Nolan Bushnell, like, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, get rid of this guy. He's like, no, he's like, I want to capture the upside, and I'm willing, because the upside's so extreme, I'm willing to deal with the downside. And so he's like, okay, we kind of secluded Steve away from the rest of the general population. And we let him work at night, and we just, told people to hold their nose because he had such offensive body odor, and he slept at the office. And he wound up being that would wind up being a good trade that Nolan did.
Yeah, I think I saw somewhere it was a video on divas and hiring divas one way or the other. It might have been Steve Jobs too. And I thought about it because we had one of my best engineers. He's brilliant, and I won't say who he is, but he is building one of our products. And anyway, he's doesn't have very high EQ. So his engagements with other people are either extremely passive or like psychopathic. So I have to have a chat with him every so often. And the other day, so I'm like, hey man, you gotta push on this team. You gotta push harder. And he's like, no, I'm pushing. And I'm like, need you to have some big energy. Get in there. I want you to tell him what to do. Like you are in charge, you go. Well, that translation to turned into him walking into a room full of like 80% women and going, Cody told me I had to put my on the table. That was like my life. And so the women came to me and they're like, this was odd behavior. I'm like, listen, that's probably my fault. I'll correspond with him, but we're not doing anything about it because he's so good. So I do relate to this idea of divas or really high performers sometimes being somebody that you have to keep, sometimes somebody you have to get rid of. There was another one that you talked about that I really liked, which is I'm obsessed with George Lucas. I just love that he's a world builder, plus has been transcendent for decades. And he was supposedly like really difficult to work with. And I loved the some of your stories that you've told about him. But I was wondering, like, he not only was really difficult, but came up with wild ideas and worked with really spiky people. Do you have a favorite story from George Lucas? Or do you have something that you think George Lucas would teach people that most people don't realize?
There's a great biography of George Lucas called George Lucas: The Life. It's written by Brian J. Jones, who's also a prolific biographer. He has a bunch of biographies I like. But it says the most important line in that book is that George Lucas unapologetically invested in what he believed in most, himself. And he was another control freak. And one of the biggest bets he did, so he did this movie called American Graffiti. And he didn't have any leverage at the time because he was still a rather unknown director. Again, another thing that was very rare is to have directors in their early 20s. The director that kind of blazed the path for all these guys was a guy named Francis Ford Coppola, who was running big budget, major movies. He was like in his late 20s. He's probably around 27 as well. And so Steven Spielberg saw this, George Lucas saw this, Brian De Palma saw this, all these directors that were and filmmakers that were friends with each other. And I think Coppola is like, maybe half a decade older, maybe a decade older. And so he played a huge role. But at the time that he's making American Graffiti, which is one of the best returns on investments, I think he did the movie for like $1 million, if I remember, and he made like 57 million at the box office. But because he didn't have creative control, and he wanted final cut on his movie because it wasn't just a movie; it's very personal to him. They cut like 4 minutes from the movie, and he said it's like cutting off fingers. It was so painful for him, and that led him to I think he made like $4 to $5 million on that movie, which a ton of money back then. And then that gave him, he wrestled on the next project for creative control over Star Wars, and then he wanted ownership of the merchandise rights. And I think the merchandise rights were the most important thing. I forgot the other thing that he argued. It was like a very simple contract. But I think just the idea of like, I believe in myself. I'm willing to take less money up front, because a lot of directors are just like, no, just pay me $10 million and you keep all the money in the back end. He's like, I don't care about the money. I care about the control. And if you're talented and you maintain control, you wind up with the money anyways. That was, I think, one of the most important lessons from George Lucas.
Yeah. You know what you've also talked a lot about, which I'm curious, and you almost only talk to entrepreneurs that have had massive longevity. And you have some great quotes on longevity too, how, history's greatest entrepreneurs think in decades. There was another one I really liked, talking about personal standards. I'm curious, what have you seen it takes to last as an entrepreneur? Like, so many people flame out. What do you want to do if you want to succeed for the long term and not be a footnote in history?
I'm glad you picked up on that because it is one of the most important things for me. Like, I'm terrified of being successful for a year or 5. I almost think like being successful and losing it is worse than never being successful. So, somebody runs a company and looks like success on paper for a year or 5 years. Like, it's like, that's not interesting to me. So for the new show, if you look at, we can go through like the first 3 guests. First guest, I picked them on purpose for this exact, we both share this love and admiration for Charlie Munger, you and I do. And he thought durability was a first-rate virtue. What I mean is, it's like you build a company to last, not to just make a bag of money and then disappear onto an island. I'm not interested in that. And so when I thought about the people I wanted to talk to, and this is this haunts me in my dreams. So, I had a nightmare the other night. I'm literally arguing with people because they're like, why don't you interview more startup founders? And I was like, I want people that have done, that are not just promoting something. Because a lot of the entrepreneurship industry, especially people that you're consuming this content, it's all, usually tied to some kind of like VC-backed company. Yeah. They're promoting, they're talking about stuff they may do in the future. And a small percentage of them will do what they're saying in the future. Somebody else can do that. I want you to be able to point to a body of work and be like, this is what I did. And this is what I learned by doing this. And I want to surface those ideas. And so like Daniel, first guest on the new show, Daniel worked on Spotify for 20 years. Second guest, let me see if I can go through this by memory. Second guest, Michael Dell. He started Dell when he's 19. He's 61 and he's still doing it.
Dude, tell him that line that Michael Dell has about how many days of the week he works.
So
I have that on my wall.
So this was hilarious because I actually DM Michael Dell because he's been very nice to me. And he like tweets and posts on LinkedIn about founders that he thinks it's like a useful tool for the world. And I really appreciate it. And then I get to spend time with him. And I think he's the GOAT. He's just one of the most kind but fascinating people to talk to because of, again, we're starting a company at 19. This is how crazy it is. I'll get to that statement one second. I highly recommend everybody read his autobiography or listen to it because he actually reads the autobiography. But there's a crazy line in there where I didn't even know that IBM at the time was the most valuable company in the world. It was the first company in history to hit $100 billion market cap, which I also didn't know. And he goes, I'm in the University of Texas dorm room. I have $1,000, and he's trying to convince his parents to let him like work on his company and drop out of school. And he's like, with this $1,000, I'm going to take on the most valuable company in the world, which is IBM. It's such a wild statement. And then to go on and to succeed and to navigate all these different technological, revolutions that he successfully endured. He built a durable company. And, somebody like that has 41 years of entrepreneur experience. Like you just sit there and talk to him. Zach Dell's a friend. And he's building this great company called Base.
He is a smart dude, which is not always the case for billionaires' kids.
Yeah, well, he's going after it. That
Zach's solar company or that energy company has is incredible.
Yeah, but he says, he goes, the Bloomberg terminal? He's like, I have dad terminal. So he's like, I call my dad's like, I have an issue with my supply chain. Well, guess what? Michael's seen everything. He's so helpful as a thought partner on this. I think it's just like insanely valuable. But this is also why I wanted to start the new show, because I resisted for a long time. I was like, no. It's like, I can't start another podcast. It's like a loss of focus. I'm just going to focus on reading biographies of history-based entrepreneurs and just doing one episode a week, and that's it. But then when you put something out like that, guess what? Anybody that lived a life so remarkable that somebody wrote a book about it, in every biography, you'll realize, almost everyone, they were reading biographies when they were younger and they were trying to figure out. So this is, again, a line from Charlie Munger where it's like, learning from history is a form of leverage. Why did Munger read hundreds of biographies? Why did Buffett read hundreds of biographies? Why did Elon read hundreds of biographies? Why did Jeff Bezos, like Steve Jobs? This just over and over again. It's obviously one of the highest value things you can do. So I was like, let me just focus on that because I think it's good for the world and other people getting value of it. Some of the best entrepreneurs in the world obviously listen to it. Michael Dell was one of them. But then what was happening is, as a result of this work, I got to get to know these people, have conversations with them. And then I'm learning so much in the conversations too. Just, it's like being able to prompt a book instead of me being just reading the book. And I can, wait, what do you mean by that? Follow up, explain that a little bit more. And so it's like, oh, I should just record these conversations and then other people can benefit from them, not just me. And I also thought, because I had this like catalog, this encyclopedic knowledge of the history of entrepreneurship, I could create something truly differentiated where if Michael Dill's sitting across from me and he says something, I'm like, oh wait, that's just like Bezos said this in his shareholder letter. And like this guy named Daniel Ludwig said this and Rockefeller said this. And so it's almost like tying it all together, like this giant weave. And I knew that because, God bless him, but there was this guy, he runs a great podcast, but he had Michael Dell on his podcast one time and he goes, so when you're starting Dell, how many hours did you work a week? And Michael's so polite and so kind, and he's a great person. And you just looked at him like, and he goes, he literally, I think, paused, he goes, all of them?
So good.
Because like, if you started a company, you know what the answer to that question is. Like, it's like, oh no, I clocked out at 5 o'clock. I have $1,000. I'm going against $100 billion company. 5 o'clock, guys, see you tomorrow. Like, come on, you know that the answer is. So I just thought, okay, I think I understand these people on a very, fundamental level, and that could maybe hopefully make the conversations interesting.
Do you think you have to be obsessed to win? Like, if you want to be one of the greatest, do you have to be obsessed?
Is there anybody I've talked to that wasn't obsessed? So we can go back through the guest list. So 20 years, Daniel Ek, obsessed. He couldn't work on anything. He just stepped down because his natural state is to work on multiple companies at one time. And we should talk about founder archetypes because we're working on this project together, which you might find interesting. And really the importance of like knowing yourself. And then you're not going to be successful unless you can build a company that's a reflection of you. Essentially like an echo or a shadow of the founder. So Daniel's had to be obsessed if Spotify wouldn't have worked. Michael Dell is still obsessed to this day. He's obsessed with puzzles. And he just looks at like constantly reinventing his company as like a giant puzzle. So he's been doing it for 40 years. Brad Jacobs has 43 years of experience as an entrepreneur. He started 8 separate billion-dollar companies. You should get him on here. He's a fascinating character. One of the most.
Yeah.
He's
on my list.
He changed my life. We should talk about inner monologues too, because I had a very negative inner monologue. And I've spent a bunch of time with Brad, and he's the one who's just like, this is stupid. Like, he used to have an inner monologue, a very negative inner monologue, very self-critical. He talks about this in his book called How to Make a Few $1 Billion, which I recommend reading. And, I knew this for a long time, but just something with the conversation with him just finally clicked where I'm like, my fuel source now is not like, fixing the wrongs that happened, like being born, not with money or whatever. It's like, no, I just love what I do and should be a more positive fuel source. And like me talking to myself this way is stupid. It's not, it served me when I was younger. It doesn't serve me anymore. So you should change. That's a direct, drastic change in my life as a direct result of Brad Jacobs' book and then talking to him. So 44 years of experience as an entrepreneur. Brad Jacobs will tell you he's obsessed still. He just loves deals. He like dances. He's just giddy like a little schoolgirl. I think he's 68 or 69 years old. He still wakes up every day fired up. He's like, dude, there was 8 days in a week. I'd work 8. He's just like, he can't help himself. The 4th one was Todd Graves. Okay. Yeah. Obsessed. The guy is worth $20 billion and all he does is sell chicken fingers.
That's insane.
But he just sells chicken fingers better than anybody else in the world.
And also, didn't he do a boating? He was like fishing, and that was the.
I can tell you stories from him. So
You found, I mean, not that you found him. He was obviously very, very successful, but nobody was really bound down at the altar of Todd Graves before you found this
but
guy.
because you astutely picked up what I'm actually interested in. It's like, I like people that are obsessed and do things for a long time. I'm very simple. And I don't care what that is. It could be a tech company. It could be, you're creating hardware, software. You could sell chicken fingers. It could be real estate. They nerd out and they think about things in such a deep way where then you talk to them or you read about them. It makes you like, oh, I can take what I'm doing seriously. Go back to Charlie Munger, which me and you will talk about over and over again. I think one of the most important things I ever heard Charlie Munger say, which is like he's like, oftentimes we find that the winning system in business goes ridiculously, this is the word he used, ridiculously far, minimizing and or maximizing one or a few variables. There's an extension to that idea, which I think is almost like a way to describe that idea in simpler terms, is find a simple idea and take it seriously. Todd Graves has not changed his menu. And he started the business when he was 23. He's 53 now. He has not changed the menu in 30 years. And what did he do? He came out to the West Coast, saw the success of In-N-Out. It's like, look how we're in LA right now. I'll probably go to In-N-Out after this because I haven't eaten anything today. I've just had coffee all day long. And he's like, well, if a simple menu, stripped down, very simple menu worked in cheeseburgers, why wouldn't it work for chicken fingers? And his original idea was like, I'm going to sell chicken fingers to drunk college students outside of LSU. Turns out a lot of people like fried chicken. I like fried chicken too. And I'm not a drunk college student. And then he just didn't interrupt the compounding. But I didn't find him. I saw a clip. He went on Theo Von. And this is the thing that once you, again, have this, I think everybody listening should just find people you admire and then just read their life story. And then in those books, they will talk about the people they admire and then go read their life story and just keep following that chain back and back and back. I think it's a very fascinating and a good use of your time. So I wouldn't have understood this clip I saw if I, maybe the first year I started Founders Podcast, but I was in like the 7th year. I'd read like 300 of these things. I have an idea of how these entrepreneurs think. And it's a 1-minute clip on TikTok or something. And he was talking about the fact that the simpler the menu is, it relates to even how fast he can turn over in the drive-thru. And I was like, oh, so this guy understands how one decision impacts everything else. And that you should limit the amount of details and then make every detail perfect. That's how I would describe what Todd Graves has done. And then you don't interrupt the compounding and you're worth $20 billion selling. Go to Raising Cane's. Why does a simple menu matter, right? Because when he has one restaurant and he's saving 15 or 20 seconds in order because the menu's simple, you pull up to Raising Cane's. This is your options. You can have 3 chicken fingers, 4 chicken fingers, 6 chicken fingers. When they told him you need a chicken sandwich, he's like, okay, I'm putting chicken fingers in between 2 slices of bun. There's your goddamn chicken sandwich. That's literally what he does. It's hilarious and it works. But the point was, you just show up there. It's like, do I want 3, 4, or 6? That's a 5-second decision. When you have one store, it doesn't matter. He's got 915. I think he's getting another 100 this year. He's growing faster in year 30 than he ever has. That makes a huge difference. And for him, you can see that, you can clock that in a clip. Oh, this guy knows his business. Where the opposite of that is a lot of these like fake promoting startup founders that are just lying to get to their next round, which I'm not interested in all. At all.
True. You know what's fascinating about the world's greatest founders like Steve Jobs? Steve Jobs didn't just control the product, aka the iPhone or the MacBook and the computers that you're on every day. He controlled the distribution. He controlled the back end of it. What do I mean? Well, the App Store, right? He knew that he wanted to control the way that apps got delivered to you. He wanted to actually be the entire marketplace. You want to distribute your product, but you want to make sure that you also own the distribution network. So what can you own instead? Your newsletter. That is why I'm obsessed with this company called Beehive, so much so that I invested in it. I have a newsletter that now goes out to 1 million people and I get to control if they get my information or not. And so with Beehive, you have a founding team that is obsessed on one thing: how to get your clients to read your things. How do you get to have better open rates? How do you get to get more subscribers? How do you get better design? How do you get ads placed in there so you can get paid to even go and distribute your ideas to other people? That's why I'm obsessed with Beehive. And if you already have a newsletter, you should move to this platform. If you don't have a newsletter, you need to get one. And I've got a discount code for you on it today. If you go to beehive.com, BEEHIIV.com, and use code CODY30 for 30% off, I am going to hook you up. So just like Jobs, you own the distribution, not just the product. one makes me think of like Ray from McDonald's too. But the other day I was at this place called Pop-Up Bagels. Have you ever been to it?
No.
I can't stop
I'm
going
trying
back.
to limit my carbs.
Yeah, this is not good
Cody.
for you. Don't go there. Don't go there if you want a six pack.
I'm on camera
But-
a lot this year. Come on.
But the part that I find fascinating is the exact same thing. You can have 3 mini bagels, 6 mini bagels, or maybe you can have 12. Those are the only options. The line is always around the corner. It's this big. It's the tiniest little center that you can imagine. They give you like kind of an astronomically large 3 types of cream cheese. You could pick between each type of cream cheese. And it's watching it is a masterclass in business because the line is incredibly long. The bagel options are all the same. It's all open, so you can see the bagels being made simultaneously. By the time you order, they've already pulled up your bag, even in a line of hundreds of people, with your name on it. The bagels are hot the second that you get them. They're just small enough where like you want to order a few more than you probably need, so they're not the large ones. $15.75 for 3 bagels and a cream cheese. The margin must be incredible on it. And you see these people run through the business. And I just watch that and think, everybody's like, oh my God, aren't these bagels amazing? I'm like, that's the least interesting part about this business. And so it is so fascinating when you can see an entrepreneur who understands that like every business is a widget business in some way. If you can get excited about chicken fingers or bagels or whatever, you can win.
And I think the bagels are probably amazing because it's not people are like, oh, to be a master of something, it's 10,000 hours. No, it's 10,000 iterations. And the amount of iterations they had gone through to finally perfect their product. And then the whole thing is they don't stop. So you go back to this. So like Todd Grace did it for 30 years. That dude, you talk about obsessing. I told him I was so excited. So like, I'm obsessed with podcasts. People think I love reading and I definitely do. But what I realize is like my real obsession is podcasting. And so what happens is when I have these conversations now, I'm usually like, I don't do drugs. We were talking about this right before we started recording. And I've never done ecstasy or any kind of psychedelics, but I would have to imagine this is what it feels like to do ecstasy because I'm so wired and like high as a kite on excitement because you absorb their energy and enthusiasm for their business and it translates to you. Yep. And I was telling Todd, I was like, dude, I need like help sleeping. And a friend of mine recommended this like non-addictive sleeping medication. And he's like, what is that? I go, why? He goes, I need it too. He's like, I slept 3 hours last night. I go, why did you sleep 3 hours? Because I couldn't wait to wake up and get inside of a store. He calls his restaurants stores. And that's what he does. He travels around and like he literally 30 years in, he'll like, you go to some Raising Cane's and he's working the drive-thru. His business card says, fryer, cook, cashier, CEO. God, he does all the jobs. The 5th guest, Mike Ovitz, who now like I text and talk to all the time. And he's been an entrepreneur for 40 years. He ran CA for like 30 years. Obsessive. Like the guy almost killed himself. He was working so much. I won't go through the whole list. 6th guest, James Dyson. He's been running Dyson for 45 years. Obsessed. Same thing. Like this, like we just went through this whole list. They either did it for at least was 2 decades to 4 to 5 decades. And when you sit down with these wiser older entrepreneurs and you hopefully listen to the podcast, they could just tell you things. They just know so much more. In many cases, they have more entrepreneurial experience than I've been alive.
100%.
Yeah, I just get a lot of energy and value.
Yesterday, I had Jeremy Zimmer on the podcast, the co-founder of UTA. And it was fascinating because I was going down the rabbit hole on him. And, he had this line about Michael Ovitz because obviously him, Ari Emanuel, Zimmer were all like, they were fierce competitors. And I was asking him, I'm like, I asked him, do you think competitors are good for you? Like, do you kind of hate them, but you're glad they exist because you make them better? And he was like, yes. But he's like, when we started UTA, Michael Ovitz, he had his foot on our fucking neck. He wanted to murder our business. And he goes, now we have a lot of respect for each other. But it is also fascinating when you go to these founders and you get to speak or listen to people who have built multi-billion-dollar enterprises that are lasting. You understand that like all the little decisions that you have, that's just a Tuesday for them. And so like, it's kind of interesting. You can see the compounding effect of like how you can handle pain as you go forward. So that's also why I like your pod.
One of the greatest maxims from a history of entrepreneurship is excellence is the capacity to take pain. And you just see this over and over again. It actually came from the biography of the founder of Four Seasons. That's where I first saw that line. But I would say with Ovitz, I would highly recommend reading his autobiography. I think it's one of the most important entrepreneur autobiographies ever written. It's called Who is Michael Ovitz? Because he talks about the regrets that he has and the stuff that he would do differently. And I really think people should avoid as much as you can working in like these zero-sum environments where in his case, like if Somebody's going to be Tom Cruise's agent or this other actor's agent, and only one of us can win.
Yeah.
And I think, and I've talked to Michael about this in private, like, I think almost if he took his exact same skill set, because he essentially what is an agent? Agent is a salesperson. He was like
100%.
the world's greatest agent. So he's like world's greatest salesperson, and literally just moved it to the East Coast and just worked it because he was running the fund, and he's been like, he's one of the greatest fundraisers I've ever seen. And he's got all these crazy connections. And I just think, one, not that he made enough money. He's a multi-billionaire. He's fine over there. He would have made more money, but I think he just wouldn't have been universally hated because, he essentially monopolized the entertainment industry. I think he had something like 80% market share with all of the directors, the actors. I forgot the exact number. It's in the book, but I think he just did a service to the future generation of entrepreneurs who's like, hey, that was actually a mistake. Burning through relationships with all kinds of people was a mistake. It's something I definitely learned from. Like I am pretty obsessive with my work, but I actually think my relationships now, my deep, true friendships are more important to me, either equal to or more important than my work. And that is like a relatively new revelation for me. I thought I was an introvert. I thought, I was like a lone wolf. I thought I didn't need anybody. And I realized, oh no, I just had like low quality people around me. And like, if you can surround yourself with high quality people, hold yourself to high standards, and then they also hold you to high standards, it's like one of the greatest things about being alive. So at this point, we're like, I will literally take time away from work to deepen an existing relationship and friendship. And I think that's the stuff. I mean, I talked to John Mackey for the new show too, for another 45 years who worked on Whole Foods. And after we recorded, I wish we got this on recording, but we didn't. And he goes, he's 72. He goes, David, when you're my age, you're not going to be thinking about the 5,000th Whole Foods store. And he's very proud of building Whole Foods. You're not going to be thinking about the 5,000 Whole Foods store. You're going to be thinking about the relationship you have with the people you love. And I'm like, okay, well, he's got 30 something years on me. What's the point of me having these conversations if I'm not going to change my behavior? If I just like, oh, great, I'm collecting information and not changing anything, then what is this? This is a waste of time.
I wonder though if some of this is like the right guidance for the right season. For instance, if Michael Ovitz and Jeremy Zimmer and Ari Emanuel didn't have their feet on the proverbial neck of some of their competitors early on, would they be who they are today? Like, do you have to be one way when you're young? And then as you get older, you become the wise elder, and that's when you stop going to attack the, other parties and instead kind of go together with them.
The interesting thing, and I'm somewhat skeptical of people that say they would do things differently. I wonder if they would, right?
Or does it just sound better?
Maybe you're valuing different things when you're in your 70s and 80s than you did when you're 25 or 35. So you have to figure that out, like what is actually important to you. And this is a lot of this when I'm spending a lot of time thinking about like different founder archetypes. It's something me and Daniel Eck are trying to figure, and it was his idea. Just because what he realized was for him, he's like all the new entrepreneurs. If you talk to young entrepreneurs, like who do they want to be like? Everyone wants to be Elon. And before that, they wanted to be Steve Jobs. And so Daniel was the same way. And he's just like, but he tried to like do this like imitation. He's like, but wait, I'm not like this. And if you look at the actual structure of Spotify, it's much more like almost like a team as opposed to like just one visionary genius. And what Daniel's realizing, and it's been very helpful because he like definitely shapes my thinking on a lot of things, is he's like, I just think I'm a better player than coach, or excuse me, better coach than player. And Steve's a player. Elon's a player. He's just like, but I'm not like that. So then that doesn't mean you can't build a successful company, but you have to know who you are. And Daniel spent decades trying to figure out who he is. And I think that's why I'm very skeptical. Like in Sam Walton's autobiography, which again, if no one's read, you should read that immediately. He's like, yeah, I missed out on a lot of my, essentially Walmart was his entire life. He worked like a dog all the time. He did have this weird balance where he would take off in the middle of the day. He'd work on Walmart 7 days a week, but he'd take like an hour to play tennis or an hour to go hunt with his dogs in the middle of the day, but then you'd be right back on it. But, you miss out on some of your kid's childhood, time with his wife and everything else. And he's dying of cancer when he's writing that book. He knows he doesn't have much time left. And he's like, but if I'm being honest, I wouldn't really do much different. I would still do exactly what I did. And so, yeah, that's a great way you were like insight that your question was actually getting to, which is just like, do they actually mean it? If they could replay it, would they do it? They might replay it as a 70 or 80-year-old man. Would they replay it at 35, super aggressive, still trying to prove themselves? I don't know. I doubt that they would.
Do you think that you also have to surround yourself only with other people who want to win like you do? Like, is that old saying, you're the average of the 5 people you spend time with, the Jim Rohnism? Like, is that true? And have you seen with the history's greatest entrepreneurs, do you need to cut people from your life that do not want to win?
This is something, it's funny. I was literally thinking about this morning. Um, there's a line in Brad Jacobs' new book, which is hilarious, called How to Make a Few More $1 Billion.
So good.
It's
So good. I aspire to write that book, don't you?
okay. So I didn't grow up with any money, right? My parents never even graduated high school, much less college, right? I was the first person in my family to graduate high school, which is a crazy thing to look back on. And I thought I was unhappy when I was younger because I didn't have money. And then you start to make money, and then you're like, why am I still unhappy? And so I am much more focused on inputs than anything else. And I think a lot of, like, there's this great book. Have you ever read Bill Walsh's book, The Score Will Take Care of Itself?
Yep.
So I think there's a lot of wisdom in that book where it's like, just do the best job you possibly can with the opportunity right in front of you. This is something that recurs in a lot of the biographies, that opportunity handled well leads to more opportunity. And we were talking earlier before we recorded that one of my closest friends is Patrick O'Shaughnessy he's an investor, but he's more well known because he has this great podcast called Invest Like the Best. And his whole thing with me, he talks about this all the time. He almost thinks like I'm a little retarded. Yesterday, he goes, you're going to retard Max into becoming a billionaire, because he's like, you have no like long-term plan. You just wake up every day and you like don't look for forms of leverage. You literally just obsess over trying to make a good podcast. And then you do the same thing the next day and the next day, and you've been doing it for 10 years. And like, look where it's getting you. And I'm just like, I just do what I like to do. I don't care. So if you tell me, oh, I'll never be able to write a book like How to Make $1 Billion, I never became a billionaire, but I got to do what I love to do. Like, I think the best definition we're kind of like dancing around here is like, how do you define success?
Mm.
And if 5 years from now, what does your life look like? I'm like, I have no idea. I was like, hopefully I'm doing this because I like doing this. And I just try to design a good 24 hours that I like, and then do it again and do it again. And again, I want to add value to other people's lives. Yeah. And I think me making these podcasts, hopefully that has information, educational and inspiring information to help you build your business. And if I just do that over and over again, then the score will take care of, the score will take care of itself. And I guess my answer to the question is like, to what is success in general, could be 5 years from now or forever. It's like the way I legitimately think about this, and I think a lot of history's greatest entrepreneurs did, you won't find many of them that are obsessed over, I have to hit a certain net worth or I have to hit a certain market cap. I almost never hear that. Mine, I would just echo what Steve Jobs' answer to this question was when they're like, how do you define success? He's like, did I make something I'm proud of? And I think that's like really, really important. But going back to this, there's a line in the new book, How to Make a Few $1 Billion by Brad Jacobs, where he says, or How to Make a Few More $1 Billion, I should say, where he says that the people you have around you is the most important thing in your life, right? And he says it more eloquently than that, but that's the general like thing he's talking about. And one thing that you observe when you're reading about history's greatest entrepreneurs, you get to talk to some of the greatest entrepreneurs, is how small their circles are and how like they're very slow to add new people. They almost go to great lengths to vet the people they have around them, which is another fascinating thing I've been thinking about. It's almost very clannish. It's almost like very human to be like leery of other people, especially when you become, a lot of these people are well-known. They're multi-billionaires. Everybody all day long wants something from them. Like invest in my thing or become my customer, or they want to like use them for something. But I would say keeping your circles, the advice I've been given, and you kind of observe it also, is like keep your circle really, really small. Make sure everybody's a high quality individual, not just like, it can't just be that they want to win, because there's a lot of people that are winning with, sacrificing all sense of ethics and morals. So you don't want those people around you. What did Buffett and Munger say? You can't do a good deal with a bad person. But I would say, yeah, they have very high bars for who they surround themselves with, because you are going to, imitate and mimic and just be influenced by the people around you. And then the line, as far as professionally, it's like, I like the Steve Jobs line where he's like, you need to be a yardstick for quality. Most people aren't used to an environment where excellence is expected. Not like once in a while. It's like, no, our standard default is excellence. And I think this ties to a lot of what you and I have been talking about, or what we touched on. It's like, it's really hard to be excellent in 50 different things. And so what I would say a lot of these people have in common is like they focus on one or two, or basically no bigger than a handful of things to be really excellent at.
I keep thinking about how a computer in the hands of somebody like Steve Jobs or Steve Wozniak or Michael Dell has the potential to unleash the most powerful products and companies the world has ever seen. But if you had that same computer in the wrong hands, well, that's where things go sideways. In 2024 alone, there were 6 mega breaches, incidents where over 100 million records of everyday people were actually stolen. So if you think you're safe, I don't know. I think you got to think about it. Google yourself, see what comes up next. It's fascinating. It's your address, usually, your relatives, your phone number. That info can easily be collected and sold by data brokers whose entire job is turning your life into a product. When I saw how much of my personal data was floating around online, I freaked out. That's what Incogni helps with. They find the sites that collect and sell your personal information and remove it for you automatically. No emailing sketchy websites or chasing one down. And if there's something specific you really want gone, Incogni also offers these custom removals for extra coverage. So think of your data like loose change scattered across the internet. Incogni tracks it down and cleans it up. And it doesn't matter if you're a public figure or not. Everyone should protect their privacy. So go to incogni.com/bigdeal and get protected. You have a quote I like, actually, which is the greats had incredibly high personal standards. And it's a simple line. It's not that it's incredibly eloquent, but if you don't hold the standard, I've never seen a world in which a founder holds a standard that is less than what the company gives back.
Yeah, I think that'd probably be impossible.
It's impossible. And so if you know that you are the highest standard in the company, then you have this moral imperative to make sure that you are holding it as high as humanly possible. In fact, I think it probably was from you too, but there was something I was listening to about Steve Jobs and how he would talk about how your job as a CEO is to give your employees unreasonable amounts of confidence and push them to be great. Um, and I think about that often. Like, our job is to push our people past the level in which they think that they are capable of. And if you can't do that, then you probably shouldn't be in charge. Um, and I think that's true. Or like Jensen Wong, who talks about like, I will pressure you into greatness,
Torture.
torture
He
you.
says, I will
Yeah,
torture you into greatness.
right. I think that's from you too. That you did an
Yeah.
episode on too.
Yeah.
His belief was that that's how he became great, right?
Well, what you realize is like when you read that, he's like, I don't like to give up on people. I'd rather torture them into greatness. Is the exact line from his biography. The book is called The NVIDIA Way. I think it's written by Tae Kim, if I remember correctly.
Mm.
And then you realize, as you read more about him, you're like, oh, he did that to himself first. He tortured himself into greatness first. What I would say is about being the ultimate authority figure. I think I find it very useful to take these ideas because we're limited to like how much we can remember. So I try to distill the basic idea down to like a maxim or aphorism,
Mhm.
and then you contextually apply it to like your situation. But the way I would think about this is Sidney Harman, this engineer, founder of Harman Kardon, says that the founder is the guardian of the company's soul.
Oof, what a line.
Yeah, and so I think like you're the one that sets the standards. I would say some people might be listening to this and be like, oh, but I heard Steve Jobs was a jerk. One of the most important things you can read, the person that worked with Steve Jobs the longest was not anybody at Apple. It was actually Ed Catmull, the founder of Pixar.
Yeah.
And Ed Catmull's got this great autobiography, but also really almost like a Bible on how to make great creative work called Creativity Inc., which talks about how he started Pixar and his life story and how they approach things. There's a 20 or 30, maybe 20 page afterword in the book called The Steve We Knew. And, he's like, I worked with this guy for, I don't know, I forgot, 26 consecutive years. And he talked about the maturation and how much Steve changed when he first met him to when, I think there was 20, he's probably maybe 30 years old when he met him. And then Steve was in his 50s when he died. And I think that's one of the most important things to learn and to read is like, yeah, that Steve is obviously very aggressive and he could be called an asshole or a jerk. I'm not saying he wasn't even later on, but he learned how to manage and to deal with excessively talented people, and he changed over time. And that afterward, which you can read in a half hour, I think is really important to understand how he truly was, not how he's depicted, in some of these stories.
Have you met a lot of incredible founders, or have you covered a lot of incredible founders that you would call nice as like the first word to describe them?
My initial answer would be no, but that's probably not true. So my personal hero, so there's 3 people I wanted to meet, right? And accidentally, unexpectedly, I met all 3 of them last year. It was James Dyson, Jeff Bezos, and Jimmy Iovine. I spent, I don't know how many hours talking to Dyson. The episode I did on the new show, David Senra, that episode is episode number 6. I don't even think we're numbering them. That was one of the best days of my life because that guy's book changed my entire life. We can go into more detail about that if you want. And it's somebody I read about. I read his first autobiography at least 5 times. I read his second autobiography at least twice. I read his history, talk about how so many of the people that are great at what they do have this love. And he says he's obsessed with the past and studying history. He wrote an encyclopedia. He considers himself an inventor, not an entrepreneur. He just became an inventor so he could continue to, he just became an entrepreneur so he can continue to invent. Bezos thinks about it the same way. But James Dyson wrote a book it's called A History of Great Inventions. He literally cataloged, I don't know, there's like 100 or 200 inventions in there. He tells the story of these things. Read that book. And he was unbelievably kind and generous and witty. And, to the point where there's a picture I think I posted online where I was like, afterwards, this is kind of embarrassing, but he did play a big role in my life. I was like, I got to give you a hug, dude. Like you literally changed my life. Like you encouraged me. You didn't even know who I was. And your book encouraged me not to give up when I went through 5.5 years of doing the podcast and no one gave a shit. Like there was like nobody listening. I should have quit year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, and just reading that book early and just rereading. It's like, this guy's struggled for 14 years, built 5,127 prototypes. His kids grow up thinking that their dad's a loser because all they see is him failing. And that guy didn't give up. I can figure things out. It was very, very motivating for me. He was unbelievably kind. Now, how much of this is like they're just being nice to me because we're making a podcast together? I don't know. Bezos, I talked to him for 3 straight hours. Unbelievable. Now there's crazy, obviously when he built one of the most, if not one of the most impressive companies of all time. And there's all kinds of stories when he's 30 and he's starting Amazon that he wanted to name it Relentless. He owns relentless.com. What is that kind of personality type? And he's pushing, but very, very kind. Jimmy, same thing. Jimmy Iovine, they're rough around the edges for sure, but I wouldn't say, I don't know, nice. I think they're just like mission. I guess some of my favorite entrepreneurs, and if you think about your work in this way, it can help you not quit. It's just like, what is your actual mission? And no, I would not call them nice. I would say that they're driven. I wouldn't say they're assholes though. I do think I just finished rereading Snowball, 700-page biography of Warren Buffett. I'm actually not going to do another episode on it. I think I could do a better job with his shareholder letters, so I'm going to read all of them instead. Mm-hmm. This happens quite frequently where I read like hundreds and hundreds of pages and don't use it. But I think they had this like no asshole rule that even if they could make money, they didn't want people around them like that. I would not consider them nice. No. Yeah. I think in many cases they are extreme personality types and that their mission comes in front of everything else. I don't think you have to be that way. I have a mission. My mission is like, I want to catalog how history's greatest entrepreneurs thought and then push that forward to the next generation. So you can say, hey, that idea, I can use that in my business, or I can use that idea. And I don't think I have to be an asshole to do that. And I'd prefer not to be. Yeah. And I think as I age, I think being kind, which has not come natural to me and did not come from like my family's super hot-headed and kind of mean to each other. And so you kind of learn like, I don't want to be that way.
No, I don't think that's necessary. But I do think, I don't aspire for people to call me nice, perhaps kind. But, when I think about our mission at Contrarian Thinking, the entire purpose of this crazy game we're playing is to be for entrepreneurs because it's miserable. It's a miserable game that we've chosen to play. Often, it's hard running a business. It is very hard when it's a Friday night and you can't afford payroll and nobody else can handle it but you, and you don't even tell your spouse because they probably couldn't handle that stress and would tell you to go and do something else. And so I'm not there to be nice to anybody. I think our mission is I want to be there to say the things out loud that nobody else will tell you that I wish somebody had told me. And maybe I'm right and maybe I'm wrong, but at least you have somebody else that kind of tells you the truth. And we get to learn from all the data of the other entrepreneurs. So I
guess what I would say is like the trait they have is they're uncompromising. Mm-hmm. And so if you're uncompromising, it's going to be very hard to be described as nice.
Yeah. Do you think that entrepreneurs who go into greatness, do they ever start with the exit in mind? Are they ever like, well, I want to sell my company for this, or I want my company to be worth $1 billion?
This is the disturbing things about talking to young founders because there was never any kind of like entrepreneur like ecosystem, right? Like there is now, and there's like all these like weird incentives behind it. Actually, we try to convince I've been trying to, what I'm interested in is like, I think about a lot about differentiation. And so there's some world-class entrepreneurs that don't do any podcasts at all. And I've tried to meet with them and try to convince them to do my new show and explain why. And a lot of this is because a lot of the content that entrepreneurs are actually consuming are actually created by investors. And so you could have incentive alignment with them, but in many cases your incentives are misaligned. And we should just think about that. And what's disturbing about that is how much of it is about start, scale, sell. And as we just discussed, like I'm interested in like create the people that created something that made somebody else's life better. So we can step back. What is a business? The best definition of the best answer to that question, what is a business? I actually heard from Richard Branson. And he says, all a business is an idea that makes somebody else's life better. And so there's a ton of tech companies right now and things are being invented all the time. Is that making people's life better? No, you're making a shit ton of money, which, okay, now you're rich. That's great. But you know what you're doing is not good for the world and you don't care. And so my whole thing is like, I'm interested in people that made a product that makes somebody else's life better. And it could be Spotify is maybe the best app on my phone besides one of the AI assistants, right? Made my life better. So I'm glad that the team there makes all, they're worth all the money they're worth. Going to Raising Cane's. I can't eat every day because I don't want to be fat, but like that 15 minutes of eating some great fried chicken, that just made my life a little bit better. You see what I mean here? It doesn't matter
100%.
the scale. It could be an app. It could be, I think Spotify's worth, I don't know, $100 billion today, or it could be this guy making chicken fingers in a box and then just doing it forever and not doing it for, to make a lot of money, to start, scale, sell. But when I talk to young entrepreneurs, it's like a lot of them start out with that thing where it's like, well, I can get acquired by this company and I can make this money. And it's just like, you get to choose the game you want to play, and that's great. And guess what? If you didn't start out with money and then you created wealth for yourself, your family, and your employees, that's admirable too. It's just not the game I'm interested in. The game I'm interested in is like, you couldn't pay me to stop. What I'm interested in is like, what is the business? What is not your first business? What is your last business? Yeah. The business that you want to work on forever.
Yeah, it's so funny. Somebody was asking me the other day, I can't remember. I did a podcast this week. And she said, why haven't you taken investors? She had taken investors, whatever. And I said, because you got to pull this thing out of my cold, dead fingers.
Yeah.
Like now, will I always have to be in front of the TV or whatever it is we're doing here? Like, no, I actually don't care about fame at all. I find it a really useful tool to do the things we want to do in the world. It's just a different type of leverage, but you don't have to pull it out of my cold, dead fingers. I love this game. Do I love it all day, every day? Of course not. But I think that's where people get confused, that idea of like passion versus like, I don't know what you would call it, relentlessness or whatever, where you find that thing that you're just so obsessed with the game, you can't stop. And my passions are different. I like smutty fairy books. That's a passion.
What is a smutty fairy book?
Oh, you're really outside the zeitgeist of women, huh? Now, do you know what the best-selling books are of all time?
50. Okay, so this was hilarious. So
you
like
probably,
50,
of course you do.
You like 50 Shades of Grey?
No.
Is that what you mean?
No, that's not a fantasy. There's no fairies in sight, David.
Okay, we said smutty. I didn't know if it was like, this turned sexual. I didn't know what was going on here.
Well, they are sexual. It's actually a giant asset class. I should figure out how to invest in this thing. But obviously, the OGs, we've got like Harry Potter, not sexual, but fantasy. But there's this huge ecosystem for women.
50 Shades of Grey meets Harry Potter.
Literally. And so they're everywhere. And it is it's the number one selling book category.
So this was crazy because, obviously love books. I read mostly old books, but I think it was our mutual friend.
Have you ever read ACOTAR?
No.
A Court of Thwarted Roses.
No.
The YouTube comments on this are going to be hysterical.
Oh God,
guys, let's find where David lives and send him some.
Don't
books.
do that. Please don't do that. No, maybe I should do an episode on one of these. But the funny point, I think it was Morgan Housel that told me this. Our mutual friend Morgan Housel, who just sold 10 million copies, who's now just hit 10 million copies sold of Psychology of Money. Yep. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. I absolutely love him.
Me too.
And I'm pretty sure he's the one that told me this. He's like, do you know what the best-selling book of the 2000s were? Maybe it's 2010s. That decade? I have no idea. He goes, 50 Shades of Grey. I was like, okay. Yeah. I haven't read it.
Yeah. Twilight before that.
No, it gets worse.
What?
Or maybe better, depending on if you're into this. He goes, what was the second best-selling book of that decade? I don't know. He goes, the sequel to 50 Shades of Grey. I'm like, damn, there's a lot of pent-up demand for this. Again. He goes, what was the third best-selling book of the decade? I go, there's no way. Was there not a what the trilogy?
Trilogy.
Yeah, he's like the third version of 50 Shades of Grey.
Wow.
Yeah, it was an interesting fact that.
Well, now we have more of a fragmented industry. There's a lot. But there are, there's this woman, Sarah J. Maas, and she was like basically came from nowhere to write this series of books that are just proliferating among women.
How did we get there from start, scale, sell?
Yeah,
though?
I don't know.
So
natural progression,
yeah,
really.
So to go back to that, it's like finding out why people are doing what they're doing, I think is actually really important. So I ask that. And usually one of the things that we want to try to map out like the founder archetypes for, and this is Daniel's idea, which I think is really smart. He's like, people think about like founder market fit. And he actually thinks the more interesting idea is founder problem fit. And knowing your archetype and then knowing other archetypes of other entrepreneurs that came before you and that match your archetype would be very useful. So make sure you're attacking the right problem. And so
what do you mean by archetypes? Have you fleshed that out yet?
So I need to name them, but like think about like all the different. And this is not a science, obviously. This is just a rough framework to figure things out. But if you think about all these like personality assessments, like Enneagram is very popular.
Yeah.
You know the Enneagram?
Yeah,
for sure. It's very popular.
16 personalities.
Yeah,
we use a lot of those for hiring.
Yeah, it's a lot of companies do this. And there's Culture Index, there's all these other tools that companies use. The Enneagram is very popular with like a lot of my founder friends. And just not only to know like what type they are, but also who like their partners could be or who they'd work well together. And it's just, again, it's not like, oh, I'm an 8 and you're a 3 and this does well together, so I only look for 3s or whatever the case is. It's just like, okay, well, there's like whatever archetype Steve Jobs is different from the archetype of a Daniel Ek. So how are they different? What are the kind of characteristics? Who do they work well together? And then you now have 400 entrepreneurs that you've studied intensely, and can we match them all? And there might be 5 archetypes, there might be 10. We're not actually sure. But I think the important part here is that they don't go back to your original question. It's like, it's not, some people do this because they just want to make billions of dollars. I have a lot of friends that work in like New York in PE, and I find them refreshing. It's not my game, but because their whole thing is like,
I have never heard anybody call somebody in PE refreshing before.
No, because
they're just amazing.
They're like, they have funny ways they think about it. They're like, VC gets all the attention, PE gets all the money.
That is true.
It's such a huge industry. And they're like, listen,
true.
The fact that VCs tell you that their customers or founders, he goes, they're goddamn liars. The LPs are our customers because they give us money. The founder's not giving us money. And he goes, I exist to make my LPs richer. And that's what I mean. It's not my game, but I like that they're not lying and they know what they're doing.
Yeah, that's honest.
That's what I mean about that. So that is their game. Their problem is take a big pile of money and make it into a bigger pile of money. I am not the right founder for that because I don't give a shit about that. Yeah. So I like this idea of founder problem fit, right? I have this I stumbled onto the problem that I'm solving, which is everybody's focused on, what today's founders are saying or experiencing or their opinions, where it's like, we have 200 to maybe 300 years of the market economy, and you have hundreds, maybe you have thousands of really great entrepreneurs that lived their whole lives, ran all kinds of experiments, learned a bunch of stuff, and then people put down their main ideas in a book. Maybe somebody should go and dig through these books, find good ideas, and then push it down the generation. That's just a weird problem that fit me because I'm an introvert and I'd prefer to sit in a room by myself, read.
I mean, I was talking to Tony Robbins the other day. The amount of money they make, he owns part of DISC Profile.
I don't know what that is.
It's kind of like 16 personalities, except think about like a more flushed out version that really helps you if you're a hiring manager for the most part. And then they have like corporate licensing or whatever. And so we use that in a lot of our companies because if I'm like, listen, you could have a janitor who's like an exceptional fucking janitor. They're so good at their job. But they could potentially move all the way up to senior leadership if you understand that that person is meant for more. But if your company doesn't know how to find them or source them, you have all this hidden talent inside your business. And one of the things that keeps me up at night is thinking about the people who work for me. One, if they're not like working enough and doing things to add value to the company, I don't like that. But also if I'm not doing enough to help them add value to the company and thus make more money in their life and all that. So anyway, but it's a big business. So it would be super interesting if you had that for founders and entrepreneurs, because I do think we're all mimetic.
Yeah,
you wouldn't monetize it?
No.
Come on.
No. Okay, so we should talk about this because, again, I think most people think, first of all, starting another business, like my whole thing is find a simple idea and take it very seriously, which is the Charlie Munger quote.
But you could just invest in it. Tell Daniel to have an operator. No.
Like,
no investing either?
Very little. Like,
This is stressful for me. I can't believe Patrick probably and Morgan just yell at you all the time about
Yes.
this. Yeah. Okay.
Morgan doesn't, because Morgan
Morgan
doesn't
would never
invest in
yell.
anything. What do you think? All his money is in indexes.
I know. I felt so pathetic listening to him because he's like, I'd be like, tell me about one unhinged things you bought. And he's like, I
Never.
did buy a house once. I'm like, fucking never mind. New
Oh
question.
no, the renovations on the Housel estate.
Okay.
Which again probably is good for marital bliss.
100%.
So maybe that's not an expense. One, I think open sourcing this is more important to the degree that other people find a value. And also, like, I'm very, very, I mean, it took me, there was probably 3 or 4 years of people around me, very close friends, just like, you should start another podcast, talking to founders, you idiot, do it. And I said, no. It's like, it's like water on a rock. That's like, you want me to do something, you have to suggest it. And I'm going to say no. And it's going to take you years to break me down. And then I'm going to come to you and be like, I have this great idea, and it'll be your idea. This is not even a joke.
Sounds like how husbands and wives work.
This has happened to so many people in my life. They now know. It's like Inception. They're like, if I want David to do something, I need to put in the idea now.
Whispered his iPhone.
It really works. There's a great line in I think one of Buffett's shareholder letters, which I'm rereading right now, where he says, loss of focus is what worries Charlie and me the most. And so I think me starting another business that's outside of my life's mission, which is founders, and then my new obsession and passion, which is talking to entrepreneurs on the new show, I'm full. I work 7 days a week. I don't have any time. Like, I'm not doing anything else. And I think this is a misconception where, or at least hopefully I can, like, to the degree that I have any influence on this, it's like people think entrepreneurs are obsessed with money. I would argue they're obsessed with control. And that if you're talented and you're working on a valuable product or problem, and you solve the problem for other people and you maintain control, you wind up with the money. But the very first person that I met that was renowned from the podcast was Sam Zell. Episode 269 of Founders is the autobiography.
You know, he's my favorite investor of all time.
And he wouldn't call himself an investor. So we'll talk about this. So I'm almost positive it's episode 269. It's the autobiography of Sam Zell, which is incredible. People should read it. It's called Am I Being Subtle? I think is the title. And I put that out, and then he listened to it, and he he liked it so much, he asked to meet me. And I love the fact that somebody in their 80s was starting to listen to podcasts, because what is he? At the fundamental, he's a learner. He's a learning machine. And so I had a 2-hour lunch with him before he died. And then we were scheduled to have dinner. I was going to have a dinner with him in Miami, and he wanted to have dinner and then me do an episode called I Had Dinner with Sam Zell and talk about the stories. And then I think the day before the dinner, it was canceled. They said, Sam's not flying down from Chicago. He's sick. I thought he had like COVID or something. 3 weeks later, he's dead. Yeah. He from cancer.
Fuck.
And so, but he was spending his last, I probably saw him 6 months, 8 months before he died. He was flying all over the world at his expense, just sharing everything he learned with entrepreneurs, having dinner with entrepreneurs, talking at conferences and events for entrepreneurs. And, that guy was as liquid as the day is long. His company was very, very interesting, where it's like technically a family office, but it was his own money and he made all the investment decisions, and he never was going to spend the money to begin with. He told me, I didn't know he was sick with cancer. He obviously didn't share that with me, that he's going to be doing deals until he died. Guess what? He did deals until the day he died. The day before I saw him, or the day before I saw him, I think he just bought, he calls them family businesses. He's like, I just bought, I forgot the number. It's like 75% of this company for $300 million, and they still run things on a fax machine. Like, he just loved doing deals, loved it. But he had a bunch of pieces of advice, which I would summarize. The main piece of advice, and we're going to tie back to the money, was, let me see if I can remember this correctly. His whole thing, and he was not subtle at all. So he was kind of like, he was very nice to me, but he wasn't like, I have a suggestion for you, Dave. He's like, do this, do this. I'm like, okay, I'm going to listen to you. So he says, go for freedom. He's like, if you keep your freedom, you can control what you work on. If you control what you work on, you can work on what you love. If you love it, you'll do it all the time. If you do it all the time, you'll get really good at it, and money will come as a result. So again, it goes back to your question. Do they start with, I want $1 billion exit. I want a certain amount of ARR. I want a certain market cap. No, his whole thing is just like, I like doing deals, and I do them all the time. I did them for 60 years, and turns out I'm really good at doing deals. But the money part was fascinating, because he's like, listen, he goes, I know all the rich guys. This is exactly what he says. He goes, I know all the rich guys. And he goes, they're all guys. And he goes, you would be surprised at how many of them are miserable. He's like, what's the point of having all this money if you're not having fun? And he goes, and he ties this to your financial decisions. He's like, the things that you own eventually own you. And there was a bunch of funny parts because he was hilarious. He was just like you saw him on CNBC. This is exactly how he is. I love people like this where there's no separation between their public and their private persona. And he goes, I have all the money in the world. He goes, I have my place in Chicago and my compound in Malibu. That's the word he used. Remember, he's like 82, maybe 81, maybe 80, 81 when I met him. And he wanted me to see his Malibu house. And he hands me his phone. So I think I'm going to look at pictures that he took on his iPhone of his Malibu house. No, he Google image searched Sam Zell Malibu house.
That's incredible.
Yes. And so he goes, I spend 38 weekends a year at my place in Malibu. I have my place in Chicago. And he goes, everything else I rent. He goes, I don't own anything else. He goes, I own a jet, which I'll get to in a minute. He goes, I have my 2 houses and my jet. And he goes, shortly after Thanksgiving and then up until like Christmas, he would take him and his like whole extended family. It sounded like there was like 30 people on this trip, 40 people on the trip to this like small village in France. And he said something funny. He goes, I could buy the whole village. And he goes, I don't. I rent it because I only think about it when I need it. And then when I leave, it's somebody else's problem. He's like, just eliminate. You don't want to be thinking about these things. And he goes, David, this is the funny part. He goes, there's only one true luxury in life. He goes, try to get to private jet money.
Yeah.
Because literally he goes, these guys drive themselves crazy. He goes, the difference between a $10 million house, this is what he said, the difference between a $10 million house and a $30 million house is like negligible. He goes, they waste their time doing things they don't like to buy slightly nicer versions of the same shit. He's like, there's only one true luxury. Get to the jet. The jet actually makes a difference. And he said he uses his jet like, I think an average of like 3, if you did the math over the entire year, he would average like 3 hours a day. So he really used his jet. Wow. Yeah.
You know what I loved about him? I loved the Zell's Angels.
Yeah.
I loved, like, there's this other guy who used to work with George Soros back in the day, like back when he was just investing in things in hedge fund land. And he wrote a book called The Venture Capitalist and Investment Biker. Oh my God, I'm forgetting his name, which is so embarrassing. It was actually, I didn't even have a podcast. I made up a podcast like a billion years ago, like before they were cool, maybe 50. I don't even know. Yeah, I guess it would have been 15 years ago, just to have a phone call with this guy who wrote these 2 books. He was in China at the time, Jim Rogers. And Jim Rogers at the time was like one of the best hedge fund managers of all time. Him and George, that was like in the first couple of years of the Quantum Fund, I believe. And they had absolutely crushed it. But he left it all to go adventure around the world, invest, and tell stories about it. He had like this yellow Mercedes that he put these huge tires on and traveled all the way through Africa on his like top down Mercedes. This is like back in the day, and made investments all over the world and all over Latin America. And I ran a business before in Latin America. So I just found that so weird. And what I love about a lot of these people, Sam Zell included, is they're weird. Like he had a motorcycle club, basically, like this kind of old, I don't know, it looks pretty stodgy guy running around on a motorcycle when he was a billionaire by then.
Like going on like motorcycle trips in like Mongolia and stuff. Like, and danger
with vests.
Yes. Somewhat dangerous. Smoking weed on the side of the road. He would talk about that. He has some funny lines. I mean, he said some stuff. I don't even know if it's true. He's like, I invented business casual. I was like, I didn't know that, but okay. Like, it's like, yeah, I was the first person. He was just funny, but he wasn't, I didn't mean it in an arrogant way. He was just so likable. And I think this is another thing. The value, this is why I think I would avoid assholes, and we go back to do the people have to be assholes? And some of this, I'm sure I'm going to have some assholes on the new show. Like I'm interviewing, or not even interviewing. I think about really having conversations with some of these people. But as far as like building relationships with, it's like, I just like likable people. Like I like nice people. Obviously, Zell obviously had an ego, but he wasn't saying these things in like an arrogant way. He was just likable. And I think there's so many, especially in the tech industry, where they're personality deficient. And it's just like, there's a benefit, a life benefit of just one, being a good conversationalist, like a good hang, and just being easy to be around and being likable. And one of the ways I think to do that is to be intensely interested in a subject. Like I'm not particularly passionate about chicken fingers, but I like that Todd Graves is. And hearing him talk about, like, he even broke it down, like what stage of rigor mortis that the chicken has to be in. You wouldn't think you wouldn't even think you'd be interested in that, but I'm interested in that he was interested in it. And therefore he is fascinating to me. And I think the biggest way to be likable and to be like somebody that people want to be around is just like, you have to be intensely interested in something, because the most interesting people are the most interested. Yeah. They're like passionate about weird things. I just heard Alex Honnold, the guy from Free Solo, say,
Oh,
they're
yeah.
like, what do you think about fame? He's like, I think it's just a means to an end. It's a way for me to climb all the time and not have a job. And that documentary is fascinating. Like, I don't want to live in a van. I don't want to do the hand workouts he does and eat with a spatula and all the stuff he does, but he's just so into it that you just can't help it. Like, you gravitate towards people like that. And
Yeah.
Zell was the same way.
Yeah, obsession is kind of contagious, isn't it? You like, if you're obsessed with something, you can make anybody else get a little bit of that obsession.
I would say passion is infectious.
That's a good
And I
one.
think this is what I mentioned earlier, where I don't do any drugs. I don't do ecstasy. I never would. But this is the way I feel after talking to any of them, Michael Dell, James Dyson. You're just like, wow, like you took whatever passion you have for your business and you gave it to me. And now that charged me up to like go and apply that to whatever I'm working on. And this is beautiful, like virtuous, flywheel or cycle.
One of my favorite mentors said a line to me that was hard for me to hear, which is that like your business is more likely to die because of you and the complex things that you do, as opposed to external forces and the things they do to you. And so he's like, complexity is the great killer of all things. And then he's like, the problem is that through life, everything gets more complex. You know, as you get older, you have more stuff, you have responsibilities, you have aging, you have all these things. So life like kind of never gets simpler. It always gets more complex. And you have a guy on your podcast, or you covered someone on your podcast, Rick Rubin, who talks. I want to talk about how he doesn't call himself a producer; he calls himself
A
something else.
reducer.
Yeah, and to tell that story because it's one that I think we all have to internalize a little bit more. You don't necessarily have to do less; you have to do more better.
There's something that you said that this is how, again, reading all these books kind of works. Like how my mind works now, where the advice that you were given echoes this advice, this guy named David Packard, who was the founder of HP. And HP, again, is this big old stodgy company. By the time it was the influencer who influenced the influencers. So like all Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, all these other people that went out and built great technology companies in the 70s and 80s looked to these guys before them, right? Just like the founders of Intel looked to it was one of the first technology companies in Silicon Valley in the 1950s or something like that. And he has this great line that more businesses die of indigestion than starvation. It's like they just try to do too much. They essentially sabotage themselves. This is also advice that Michael Dell gave, I think on the podcast, maybe in private, but he's like, most founders just sabotage themselves. Like you're not taken out by competition. You just can't handle your success, or you took your foot off the gas, or you just did something that you honestly sabotage yourself, as opposed to like being taken out by a superior product from a competitor. And so Rick Rubin's point was just like, he has this thing called a ruthless edit, which I love. He's like, okay, we're working on albums 10, 12, 15 songs. We made 50. Now we're going to pick the 5 that we absolutely cannot live without. And so you force yourself, you design within constraints, which a lot of the history's greatest founders do. They found it very valuable to design within constraints. And these are the 5. Now, before we add any other ones, it has to at least match the quality of this. So what's number 6? It takes a long time. And it's really hard to get to 10. And maybe you have to throw out the other 45 songs and you haven't done enough. So now you have to do more. And this is just very, very common, where it's like less is more, but to get less, you have to do more. And one thing that I love that is tied to the bagel place you mentioned and Raising Cane's, that we talked about this, or even look at like the Apple II, like the first very successful product that commercially successful product that Steve Jobs and Apple made, where it's like, you just have to do one thing really, really great. Just one thing. And that's usually because you made something easier for other people. And there is this weird paradox in humanity where I think we abhor complexity and we crave simplicity, but we make everything that's simple complex over time. And so knowing that there's a great line from Sam Walton's autobiography that's about this. Walton is telling a story in the autobiography, but really it's a metaphor where all of the products are getting shipped from the Walmart distribution centers into the stores. And then he found that many of them were mispriced. So then they start this thing where now there's this other layer of these people that go around with these like scanning devices and making sure, verifying that the price in the system is what the price says here. And his whole point was just like, we're adding layers of complexity when we should just, he's like, you have to beat bureaucracy back across the line. It's going to creep and you beat it back. It's going to creep and then you beat it back. He goes, the solution is not scanners. The solution is doing it right the first time, but we can't help ourselves. We made it more complex. And so he looked for these kind of weird decisions that people make where it's like the solution is just doing it right, not overcomplicating it, which is, again, I think more in line with like human nature. We just love to complicate things, even if we abhor complexity.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other part is when you have more complex things, you feel like you've accomplished more. And so, I see it a lot of time in our companies. It's like, well, I hit all these 47 activities today. It's like, yeah, but you didn't do the one thing that really fucking mattered that needed to be done more than anything else because it was harder than doing those 47 things. Because sometimes to put that one thing on the list doesn't feel as good as doing the 47.
Larry Ellison, there's like 3 good biographies of Larry Ellison, and in at least 2 of them, he's fighting with his assistant because she's like, "There's 1,000 things we have to do." He goes, "No, there's 4, and I'm only going to focus on these 4 and ignore every single thing else because all the value. If I can solve these 4 problems, or these 3 problems, or these 2 problems, this one problem, that's actually what I do, and the rest of the stuff can be ignored." But the reason I tied it to like the bagel shop that you mentioned earlier, and Todd Graves, his simple product. And Rick Rubin's point was just like, if you look at the work that he did, where he says like, "I'm not a producer, I'm a reducer." You came in with this body of work. There's in essence, in this course, a lot of value. You overcomplicated it. You need somebody else with other eyes to see, hey, we can cut away everything else and make it to like, what is the thing that we cannot delete, that we have to have? And this is why a lot of the stuff that was produced or reduced by Rick Rubin 30 years ago, you can listen to today, still sounds good. Because he goes, hey, 50 years ago, a guy with a good voice strumming a guitar and singing sounds good. So if it sounded good 50 years ago, if it sounds good today, highly likely it'll sound good 50 years from now. Same thing with a piano. A piano and a beautiful woman's voice sounded good 50 years ago, sounds good today, will sound good 50 years from now. And I think what's happening is like when you hit on this essence, the reason people respond to it is because like you essentially made the decision for them, right? You eliminated everything that didn't have to be there. You only have the essential. It's the same reason why he talks about in that book. I would recommend listening to a song called "Hurt" by Johnny Cash, which was a cover. I think Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails is the first person to do it. He was like 21 when he wrote the article or wrote the song. Sorry, and then Johnny Cash is like 70 when he's singing it. And you listen to that, and Johnny's been dead for years, and it still sounds good today. And the song's probably, I don't know, 15 years old or something like that. It still sounds good today. Just like the going and eating at Raising Cane's or the bagel place you mentioned earlier. It's just like you had a good experience there, right? These things have been going on in Raising Cane's case 30 years. He didn't interrupt the compounding. That what you see there, you're like, oh my God, the guy's worth $20 billion, has 915 stores. But he's like, he just didn't. Time carried all the weight. Time did all the work. He just did the same thing every day and he waited for the world to catch up. And if you build something that's great, then what humans do, you can't keep things that are great to yourself. When you see a great movie, listen to a great podcast, meet a great friend, go to a great restaurant, it's impossible to not tell other people about it. It's just what happens. And the problem is this will tie back to almost everything we've been talking about today, which is like, that's why it's so detrimental. And you see the success in most entrepreneurs' lives happen multiple decades in, because they didn't interrupt the compounding. You had to wait for time to do most of the work. And that's why the start, scale, sell doesn't work unless you just care about money and you get the money and then you go, do something, sit on the beach or whatever the case is. But my point is the people that we're obsessed, you have to do something. Let's say somebody comes and buys everything from you tomorrow for whatever. What are you going to do the next day? You're going to start something else.
100%.
You're not the personality type that can build a very valuable company is not the kind that can sit around and do nothing.
Mm. It's also, I think, incredibly difficult to simplify things. Often I'm sure you found this too, but you're taking, I don't know, a 700-page book like Snowball and trying to synthesize it into one episode. That is actually quite a complex thing to do. You have a lot of decisions you have to make. You have to pull the core or soul out of it or the lessons that you want out of it. And I think, sometimes about the stuff we do on the internet, like we'll try to, explain acquisitions in some way, shape, or form in a really simplistic way, which is actually incredibly difficult to do. Even the vernacular in finance is tribal knowledge, a lot of nouns and vowels in the words that don't need to be there. And so making something about even a word like acquisitions, which some people have a hard time spelling, and simplifying it is actually quite difficult. And so, we talk about that a lot when we invest is, I think I stole it from Warren Buffett back in the day, or it might have been Zell. I think it was Zell. Zell basically said, if I can't, like one of his employees came in with like a big folder on one of the deals that he wanted to do and was like, here's the brief on doing this deal. And he was like, tell it to me in a couple sentences. He's like, I can't. He's like, then write it on a page. He's like, I can't do that. And he's like, if we can't understand the deal in a page, we shouldn't do the deal if the only way to explain it is through a folder. And I think about that now. It's like
Zell learned that from Jay Pritzker. So my friend that I mentioned earlier, my friend Rick, was mentored by Sam Zell for 25 years. And Sam took an interest in him when Rick was like in his 20s, and what he would say is like, I was in my 20s and a nobody, and Zell just decided he liked me. And so he took me all around the world, and we would like work on deals together. But they also, Rick would try to, I think there's a great line in this book I just read by Kevin Kelly. It's called Excellent Advice for Living, Wisdom I Wish I'd Known Earlier.
Yeah.
And he says, one of the most counterintuitive rules of the universe is the more you give, the more you get. And so Rick built a relationship with Sam by giving, by trying to, hey, here's this undervalued company in Egypt we might want to look at, or look at this deal over here. And basically just doing an active service, right? But what would happen is Rick would bring him a deal and be like, okay, here's exactly what you're saying. Here's the 10 things that we have to solve or whatever. And Zell would look at it and be like, number 5. That's the only thing. If we solve number 5, everything else falls in line. And Zell talks about this in his autobiography, that he was mentored by Jay Prisser, who was one of the best deal makers, right? Living, probably a decade, maybe 2 decades older than Sam Zell at the time. And Sam would do exactly what Sam would do to Jay, what Rick was doing to Sam, which is I'd come bring him a deal and Jay would just look at it. It's like, there's only one important thing here. You have a list of 7 things. It's not 7. It's just this one thing. And if we take care of this one thing, everything else will fall in line. So it's that simplification. This is why I said it's not 10,000 hours, it's 10,000 iterations. Because how many deals by the time, you can't do that when it's your first deal, your second deal, your 5th deal. Jay had probably looked at 10,000 deals by that time, 5,000 deals by that. He just understood it in a way. What we call intuition is really just like the sum of your experiences and your subconscious kind of explaining to you. You can't even, this is what I learned from Rick Rubin too, when you just mentioned really hard to take a 700-page biography and distill it down to its essence in an hour-long podcast. And people are always just like, well, how do you do it? And it's just like, it's a skill because I've done it for 10 years. Go listen to episode 1, 2, 5, 10, 25, 50. They probably suck compared to what I can do now because I didn't understand that like I had to take time to train my intuition to do this. Rick Rubin would tell you the exact same thing, where he's constantly critiquing the stuff he produced and created when he started his record label. He started producing when he was in his dorm room. He's in his 60s now, still doing it. He's just like, I didn't have enough training on my intuition. And you'll see this in all kinds of different domains. I'm reading Roger Federer's biography called The Master right now. It's an excellent book. And one of the things that he really annoys him is that everybody talks about how effortless his game looks. It's so smooth. It's beautiful. He's like, yeah, you know how long it took me to make it look smooth and beautiful? I wasn't born with his ability to play. Another great example of this is that I empathize with, and I think Rick Rubin does, and I would say Steve Jobs does, is people ask Steph Curry what he thinks about when he's shooting. And he goes, absolutely nothing. It's just, I've shot this exact shot 100,000 times. And so me thinking about it would make it worse. There's a great story in Johnny Ives' biography, which is really good. And I think it's episode 178 of Founders. And he talks about the difference, the contrast between the way Google's run and Steve Jobs ran Apple. And, you know, when Google would do 200 A/B tests on what color this button should be. And they were making, remember the iMacs, the old school iMacs where like it had a big, like this is when computers were big and fat and thick.
It was like orange or
and
blue.
They had a handle and then they decided they were going to make them all different colors.
Yeah.
And Johnny says that there was no like focus group. They didn't A/B test anything. He says Steve came down to the design center and me and Steve looked at the colors and in 30 minutes we picked every single color. 30 minutes, just taste. And those were the colors that shipped. That was Steve's intuition for 30 years as an entrepreneur by the time he got to that point, to be able to trust. You shouldn't be trusting your judgment, trusting your intuition when you have to prove to yourself that you should trust it. And Steve did the work necessary to trust his intuition and trust his judgment. I think you're going to see that in a lot of fields, music, entrepreneurship, sports. You just see it over and over again.
I think a lot about what skills will matter in the future with how fast technology is changing, with what's happening in the world right now with AI. And it does seem like this idea of taste seems tantamount. What are you thinking about what's going on right now in the world of AI? What do you think the greatest entrepreneurs are thinking? Does this matter? Is this always just the same thing? Is there always just some new industrial or technological revolution and there's opportunity in every market and we need to not be defeatist about it? Like, how do you think about this?
If you agree that the best definition or a great definition of a business is what Richard Branson said, that all the businesses is an idea that makes somebody else's life better, there is always infinite ways to make somebody else's life better. So therefore there's always infinite opportunities, in my opinion. With that said, I do think you do not ignore technological phenomenon, technological revolutions. We're obviously going through one now. I think you should use so what I do is I just force myself to learn and to build these into my workflow now. So I'm sure there's going to be AI generated podcasts that can do exactly what I do. 100%. I would imagine that's going to happen relatively soon. If it's not, this year, next year, 5 years from now. And so just to use the tools, the technology, because all technology is my favorite definition of technology is, from Peter Thiel in his book 0 to 1. Technology is just a better way to do something. And so I'm just using them to be better at making a podcast, and hopefully that podcast and that information in the podcast makes somebody else's life better. See how it connects? Now, I think the mistake when you're looking back at history is the only thing constant is change. And technology is never going to stop. And I think the smartest ones took advantage of it. So think about one of my favorite times in industries to study is I've done 13 different episodes on the early American automobile founders. So Henry Ford, Billy Durant, founder of GM, Henry Leland, the founder of Cadillac, the Dodge brothers, all the way down to some component makers like Albert Champion, who made the spark plugs everybody used, Alfred Sloan, who made the ball bearings of all these companies. It's just very fascinating. It's they all knew each other. They were all in one spot. And this was just happening in Detroit in 1900. If you were a young mechanically inclined man that were interested in that industry, you better get your ass to Detroit right away. And one of the most fascinating things I realized was Billy Durant had there's multiple ways to succeed, right? So Henry Ford had one idea. He's I want to make the car for the everyman. He had literally one idea his entire career, and he didn't know how to do it yet. He's cars are luxury items. They're hand built. They're $6,000 when, we're making not even $1 an hour. I'll never be able to afford doing. I want to mass produce. I want to invent the mass production of the automobile. So then I can, the worker making the automobile can actually afford the automobile, which was never, the people making the cars could not even afford the cars. That was his one idea. He was wildly successful. One of the richest people on the planet as a result of that idea. Billy Durant also succeeded. He got kicked out of GM twice, but that's a story for another day. And his idea was I'm just going to make a car conglomerate. And I'm going to buy all the early brands, put them together in General Motors. General Motors is today. But the fascinating thing about Billy Durant is, what was he working on before he worked in the car industry? He essentially built one of the most successful carriage companies. So he was making carriages horse-drawn carriages. He just took the idea that was working for horse-drawn carriages, realizing, my business is in trouble with these cars running around. Maybe I should just take the same skill set and ideas and apply it to this new domain. So the future is always going to be unpredictable. I love people going around. It's we're only not that far from New Year's, and everybody's here's my predictions for 2026. And I just laugh. This is all I do is all day long is read. If you read history, you just have very smart people making all these kind of predictions about the future that don't come true.
Oh yeah.
Humans don't really have great, predictive ability, generalized predictive ability. You can identify a trend or an interesting idea in an industry that you're paying attention to and then build a business around that insight. I'm not saying you can't do that. That's what Billy Durant just did. But the answer to your question is I want to learn these tools because I'm interested in technology. I'm interested in finding tools that make my business better, right? And then I'm just going to do the best job with the opportunities in front of me. And I'm going to do that every single day. And the score will take care of itself. I'll get what I deserve out of life. But there's just impossible to know what's happening. I do think this is I think reading right now, about the Industrial Revolution in the 1800s. I think reading about the early compute industry would be interesting. There'd be analogies there. I talked to Bezos about this. Bezos's analogy for this, because he's all he thinks about is AI all day long now, is he calls it these thin horizontal enabling layers. And he thinks AI is more akin to electricity than it is to anything else. The internet was a thin horizontal enabling layer. Electricity was a thin horizontal enabling layer. AI is a thin horizontal enabling layer. And he goes, once you new thin horizontal enabling layer is invented, it goes everywhere. Electricity, they weren't thinking they were going to install electricity. They're thinking, I want lighting. And guess what? If it's useful for that, how many other inventions have now plug into electricity that we could have never possibly predicted? Same thing with the internet. The origins of the internet. What did they think it was going to be used for? And then they could not have possibly predicted all the millions, hundreds of millions of different inventions and things that you could do on top of that. And so his belief is that AI is going to be the exact same way, where it's like the intelligence as a service is going to go everywhere, and you're going to invent countless other ways. There's no way to predict all the different inventions that humans are going to utilize this tool for. And it won't be, I talked to a lot of some of these AI, they think it's like the last invention. It's like, it's not the last invention. Like humans are going to invent, assuming we're around, are going to constantly invent more and more things.
Do you ever sometimes take a pause and just think, holy shit, what is my life that I get to talk to Elon Musk, all my heroes, all these people consistently?
No. Here's the thing. I think thinking like that, I have this maxim I got from Conor McGregor. Have you ever seen this documentary? It's on Netflix. It's called Notorious.
Oh, it's incredible.
I'll tell you the maxim first, and then tell you like one of the lessons that he didn't even adhere to himself, which is like, if you go to sleep on a win, you wake up with a loss. And that documentary is incredible because, you know, he's literally living at home, has no money. I think he's working as a plumber's assistant or something. He's somehow had the foresight to have a camera crew follow around what at this point was just like kind of like a loser, right? Chasing a dream, but nothing to point. He had this, there's another maxim, belief comes before ability, which I hate when people are like, oh, you shouldn't have so much self-belief. They tell us entrepreneurs, like, generate evidence and then have belief. And I'm like, well, I've read 400 of these books and none of these people did that. They believed in themselves way before. Everybody around them is telling them they couldn't do what they're doing.
And all the data actually says you're right.
Exactly. Belief comes before ability,
100%.
Not after. I think that's very important. But what's fascinating is like, you know, there's one thing where he's like in his mom's kitchen and there's like the Ireland's like, he's like cashing welfare checks. And I think he's in collections on some credit card bills. And he's just like, I'm going to be the champion of the world. He's saying all this the crazy stuff. But what he realized was just like the value comes from the work and doing the work every day. And that's why he said, if you go to sleep on a win, you wake up with a loss. And then he made hundreds of $1 millions. Not judging anybody else. Supposedly he's got a very fierce drug habit, which kind of looks might be the case to me. And so it goes back to this quote tweet where I just quote tweeted Andrew Huberman, where it's just like, mute the world and build your own. I just wake up every day. Like, I really do think Patrick's probably right that I don't have like this master plan. I don't even seek points of leverage. I do all these things that I don't seek efficiency. No one else works on the podcast. Like, they're like, why don't you hire an editor? Why don't you hire a researcher? It's just like, I like doing it. There's a great line from Charles Schultz, who's the founder of the guy that did Peanuts. Remember? He grew up reading Charlie Brown and Snoopy. And he penciled every single comic strip. He wrote the stories. He did everything. He had this like thing in his will about like what happens to Peanuts after he dies. He wouldn't let anybody else continue it on. And then you have to publish. This is the last one I ever want published. Like, he thought a lot about this, but he would give tours of like his studio. And I think he was like in his 70s then. And they're like, why don't you just like write a bunch of them? They were first like, why are you still doing this? Is the question. And then they're like, why don't you like batch them and then, you know, take time off? And his answer to this was great. It's like, he didn't understand the question. It's like, why are you still doing this? He goes, you don't work all your life to do what you love to do, to not do it. And so my whole thing is like, I really do mute the world. Okay, I'll tell you an embarrassing story. This is embarrassing to me. So every once in a while, some of my friends have companies and they like just want me to like sit in on like meetings, like board meetings and stuff. And I'm not on any boards. I have no interest in doing that. I am fiercely interested in entrepreneurship and how they think about building businesses. And I look at this as like a way to learn. And so I was doing this the other day with two close friends of mine, and they were talking about acquiring a business in New York. Okay. And I was paying attention, but then they kept saying this name over and over again. And they kept saying Maduro. And again, I don't read the news. Okay. And again, because we were talking about New York, I was like, why do you guys keep bringing this up? And they're like, dude, did you not see, this is going to be real embarrassing. They're like, Trump kidnapped Maduro. I thought they meant, because we're talking about his business in New York, I thought they meant Mandami. I'm like, he kidnapped the mayor of New York City. Like, how did I not hear about this? Like, no, you idiot. The president of Venezuela, as if that was anything else.
More normal. Yeah.
I was like, I didn't know. They're like, I don't look at the news. I didn't know this. Now, that's embarrassing. But my point being is just like, listen, the big stuff will get to me. If there's a war, if there's a pandemic, I'll hear about that. That will come down to me. But no, I think the worst thing I could ever do is think about who I get to meet or who's listening to the podcast. It's just like, hey, this is my retard maxing, to use Patrick's term. It's like I only think in 24 hours. Literally. So it's like, what do I like to do? I like to wake up, work out, I like to read. Then I'll have lunch. Then I'll reread past highlights. Do that multiple days a week. At night, I usually go to dinner with the founder. All my friends are entrepreneurs. Do calls throughout the day, like not like meeting calls, like friendship calls with other smart people is another form of education. Once or twice a week, I sit down with a founder that I'm intensely interested in talking to. We record another podcast, and that's it. And then I'm like, oh, that day was pretty cool. I like that day. I'm going to do that day again tomorrow. And then I'll do it again the next day. I don't even know what today is. I assume it's a weekday. Could be Sunday. Don't know because my schedule looks the same all the time. It's also very difficult for some relationships in my life. But like so no, I never think about anything. I just think about like podcasts to me is like, oh, these are miracles. I've learned so much from listening to podcasts. They're great tools for education. I hope I'm building something that makes somebody else's life better. If it's fascinating to me, I'm not, there's probably 10 million Davids out there. Me and you we've never met before today. We have almost the exact same interests. There's 10 million Cody and Davids out there, and they'll probably like this podcast too. That's it. There's no other grand plan. It's just like, oh, this is great. I like to learn all the time. And then I sit down and share what I learned.
Well, I think it's so cool. I mean, I think what keeps me up at night with this is, can you imagine what a tragedy it would be if there's going to be millions of people that listen to this across all the social channels, right? That's millions of people's hours. That's years in like a human collective life. And what if it sucked? What if it was not valuable to them? Like that is a tragedy to do to people who have a very finite thing called time. And so I just want to thank you for being here. This was so useful. I am a huge fan of both of your podcasts.
Thank you.
They're not easy to make, so thank you for making them. It's David Senra is the new podcast.
Yep.
Founders Podcast is the long-standing podcast. And I will say also you increasingly do incredible shorts now on Instagram too for the attention deprived that need the 60-second spots. And that is Founders Podcast. Yep. On Instagram, right?
Instagram's the biggest channel there. Oh, so there's a real quick story there too, where like I believe in like tiny teams, essentially mission driven, concentrated on like focused. This is like my framework for entrepreneurship. So pick a mission, be really concentrated on like your resources, time, money, energy, attention, all to that mission. Tiny teams of just A players. Because again, all I'm doing is reading the books and taking the ideas from the books and applying it to my own business, which is, hopefully what the podcast served for other people as well. And Steve Jobs, like a tiny team of A players can run circles around a giant team of B and C players. So my shorts, which I like too, literally is one genius kid living in France.
Dude, they're all the same too.
I don't manage him. He was obsessed. I met him through this guy.
Let me guess. He's also white. He's like sub 30. He's probably like 26, 27.
He's in his early 20s.
Yeah.
But the funny part is,
and a little like slightly autistic and really obsessed with the game of video.
No, he is an obsessive person. But I met him through Blake Robbins, who Blake Robbins is an investor. He used to be at Benchmark. Now he's his own fund. But I think his Twitter bio says he like hangs out on the edge of the internet, and he finds like weirdly talented people. Yeah. And he's like, "Hey, will you meet this kid? He's in from Europe. He's in New York. He's obsessed with a single podcast, and it's yours." And I was just talking to the kid because I thought he was talented. I was like, "You should move to America." He was doing all this other way to make money that he wasn't passionate about. And I was like, "Just how much do you need? Like, what if you just made these shorts for me, right? How much you need?" Named his price. I was like, done. Didn't even negotiate with him. And now I'm helping him because he's going to be one of the greatest filmmakers, I think. He like mastered short form. Now he's making short movies. Then he wants to make like, he wants to be like Christopher Nolan and Steven Spielberg. And I was like, listen, I'll not to the degree that I can help you in any way. Like you have been so helpful to me. Like if I can make an introduction for you, I'd invest in you, and I don't even like investing. Like I'll do whatever you can because you're so talented. Like I just think about things in terms of people, but this also applies to like the reason that you want high quality people around you is I don't need to manage him. He makes them, he sends them to me. This is our workflow. I literally, and then like, I don't manage him at all. He sends them to me. I watch it. I'm like, I'd watch that. And if I like it, I post to the channels. And if I don't post it. And he's made, I don't know, like 200. And I probably haven't posted, I don't know, 5. Like I have a big backlog I need to post, but I'm talking about ones I didn't like. That's it. How much time did it take? I just identify a great person and name your price. And he named his price, and that's it. It just makes my life a lot easier. So, I
Well,
appreciate
this
it.
was an incredible podcast, and also I have to give you one more compliment, which is, do you know what we obsess on about you and your
No.
podcast? Your ad reads. They're the fucking best. And I like never thought I would like an ad read, but like whatever Ramp is paying you, they need to increase it because literally, do we not? I literally go, if this isn't David Senra level ad read, I'm not fucking reading it. Give me a new version. Then we go like 3 or 4 versions on it. We have our own.
Yeah.
It's not like copying your style, but meaning like the intent of it. Like you can just tell. And I think other people do this too, but I'm always like, is it coming? I think he's going to talk about savings. And then you sneak me and it's not it.
Yeah.
And then it's it.
Well, and again, this goes back to like the importance of concentration and focus. Because to me, it's like anything you hear on the podcast, whether it's an intro, an ad read, anything, a single word, it has to make sense. And so I appreciate you saying that, but like it was just like, hey, since I don't work on anything else, I can spend a lot of time. So every single ad is custom to that actual episode. And I'll reference what's going on in the episode. They take a long time to make.
Totally.
But why wouldn't you do that? Like, I love what I do. I would want to listen. Again, this goes back to Stephen King where he says, I'm not only the writer, I'm the first reader.
Yeah. Oh,
I edit the podcast. So I listen to every single, I'm the person that makes it, but also the first listener. Yeah. Why would I put into things that I don't want to hear? And to me, some of the podcast ads are so jarring. I'm like, oh, this is like, we were in this like beautiful flow of this conversation. It's just like, and then it's almost like the DJ like stopped the music.
100%. Yeah, that's how ours were. But then, because I listen to, and it's funny because I'll have new team members come and they'll say, well, why do you review every piece of content that goes out across Contrarian Thinking? I do. I have it's like a workflow. I review from every tweet to every email to every whatever. And they'll be like, well, somebody else could do that. And that horrifies me because it has my name and face on it and it's somebody else's time. But your ads are incredible and you've made me think about ads differently.
This is not a new idea. This is the beautiful thing. I literally have no original ideas and people are like, you shouldn't say that out loud. Why? Like every single person I read about is smarter than me. I don't feel bad about that. They are smarter than me. That idea the fact that I check everything and you check everything, that was Steve Jobs. This is a great book. I highly recommend everybody read. It's called Insanely Simple. It was the obsession that drove Apple's success. I think the guy's name was like Ken Siegel. He was Steve's ad guy. And he said every Wednesday, I think at 3:00, he had a marketing meeting. I could be wrong on the dates, but basically he said it didn't matter if it was a billboard in Times Square or one in rural Missouri. Nothing went out without Steve personally okaying every single piece of Apple marketing. It's what you do when you care.
Yeah, it's so good. David Senra, you're the man.
Choose happiness. I see that on people's bumper stickers. And I feel like ramming my car. You need unhappiness, and your suffering is a very sacred thing.
What is the secret to happiness? World-renowned happiness expert, Harvard professor, and best-selling author Arthur Brooks shares exactly that on our episode.
Happiness isn't just a thing that you flip a switch.
One day, I'm kind of happy. One day, I'm not so happy. Do you think we can actually control our happiness?
You could say that the secret to happiness is...
That's fascinating.
This knowledge is actually burdensome.
We have to hide this.
You and your entire audience now special power.
Is it true that one of the keys to happiness is... Are you happy or are you stressed, worried, a little anxious? Turns out since the 90s, the data says we are more unhappy every single year. But what if everything that we've been told about our mind and happiness is wrong? What if instead there is a formula for being just peacefully happy? World-renowned happiness expert, Harvard professor, and best-selling author with Oprah Winfrey, Arthur Brooks, shares exactly that on our episode. If you want to find happiness, real love, and if you want to be able to spot a narcissist a mile away, today we give you the happiness formula. Is it important to be happy?
It is. Everybody wants to be happier than they currently are. Now, one of the mistakes that they make is thinking that they can be somehow cosmically happy, which isn't true, at least this side of heaven. And part of the reason for it is that we're not built to be perfectly happy. We have negative emotions because they keep us safe and alive. Fear, anger, disgust, and sadness. These are defense mechanisms. They're signals that something is not right around us, which is why we have negative emotions. And so they're very, very important for our protection. And we need negative experiences because that's how we learn and grow. I mean, you write about this a lot. I mean, the experiences that people actually have in their daily lives is how they learn. And so if you were perfectly happy, you'd be in danger and not learning. And that's a bad situation to be in. So perfect happiness is not the goal, but happierness really is the goal, is getting happier by learning how the science works, learning how to manage yourself, changing your habits, sharing ideas with others. And that's really what my work's all about, is happierness.
Is there any correlation between being happier and healthier?
There is some, and it depends on what we mean by healthier. For sure, mentally healthier, absolutely. One of the greatest sources of unhappiness is mood disorder. Mood disorder meaning generalized anxiety and clinical depression. This is a hugely important problem, especially for people under 35 today. We've all heard about the explosion of mood disorders, especially since the coronavirus epidemic and the onset of the overuse and misuse of screens in people's lives. And so the result of that is that this is the number one thing that's pushing up unhappiness. Now, this is a distinction that matters because happiness and unhappiness are not opposites. They're largely governed in different hemispheres of the brain, as a matter of fact. So to say, if I got rid of the screens and had fewer aggravations and mood disorders, I would be happier. That's wrong. You'd be less unhappy.
Wow.
So that's a really important thing to keep in mind. And you know, I try to make that distinction a lot in my teaching.
What do you mean it's in two different centers of the brain? This is like your prefrontal cortex and your what? Where does happiness versus unhappiness live?
When we're talking about mood, that's largely a limbic phenomenon. So the limbic system is sort of the second part of your brain. The first part of your brain, often called the reptilian brain, is the part of your brain that senses stimuli around you below your level of consciousness. That's in your brainstem and cerebellum, et cetera. That says, you know, what the air temperature is and the, you know, the light and whether somebody who's with you is a threat to you. And that's, you're not paying attention to that. Your body is, but you're not, because it would distract you too much. That sends these signals to the limbic system, which was developed between 2 and 40 million years ago. We have this in common with all of the mammals. It's also known as the paleo-mammalian brain to neuroscientists. And the limbic system of the brain creates emotions. Emotions are the universal language of humanity. We do have an actual language that we all speak. It's not Esperanto. It's emotions, and we all have the same emotions. Fear, anger, disgust, and sadness are the 4 basic negative emotions. Joy, interest, and surprise are the basic positive emotions, and we all have those 7 emotions. That's the universal language, and those signals to us are, you've picked up some stimulus that says something should be either avoided or approached. And so you get negative or positive emotions as a result of that. That's all they are, is just that particular information. And what you find is that different parts of the limbic system govern these different moods. And so the negative emotions, they're largely, and again, these are newer studies and it's somewhat contested in neuroscience, we see more activity in the right side of the brain when people are experiencing negative emotions. And that governs the left side of the body. So it's interesting, when you see little kids, I live with one of my grandsons now, and he's little. I mean, he's managed by his limbic system. He's not being managed by the prefrontal cortex, the executive centers of his brain yet, because he's not even 2. When he falls down or something, which he does a lot because, you know, he's not that coordinated, you don't know if the waterworks are coming, but you can see a little twitch on the left side of his face if he's about to cry, because that means the right side of his brain, fear, anger, disgust, and sadness, are especially active. And that gives you a premonition of what's going to come. So a little twitch in the left side of his face, and then he starts to cry.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. So watch the left side of people's faces when you're talking to them, and they will not be able to involuntarily control the activity. Slight twitches, a little bit more left face activity when they're experiencing negative emotions when you're talking to them. It's a good tell with your husband.
Wow. So let's, I'm going to tell him. I'm not going to tell
Don't
him,
tell
actually.
him.
No, I'm going to keep that.
I just
Yeah.
gave you
Why
special
would
powers.
I?
You and your entire audience now have special powers.
Yeah, I can't
He
watch
listens
this
though, right?
episode. No, we have to hide this.
Yeah.
So if I'm talking to somebody and they, let's say I'm talking to somebody and they think poorly of
Yeah.
me, or they are having a thought where they don't believe me in a
Right.
second, might that sometimes show as a twitch on your
Yeah, well,
left?
or here's generally how you'll see it. It'll be like this. People are watching us on YouTube, they can see this. I'll have to describe it for people just listening to us.
Oh, yeah.
You notice that it's easier to scrunch up the left side of your face than the right side of your face?
Yeah, it is.
And the reason is because you have more practice doing that. The muscles they're more accustomed. So when you're concentrating on something that's not going very well, you're in traffic, you're more likely to have a kind of an asymmetric little grimace where you favor the left side of your face. And when somebody's listening to you and they're doing this, that means that left side of the face is going. that means the right side of the brain is more active. Again, this is contested because everything in neuroscience is contested. And I'm sure some, 5 neuroscientists are listening to us going, no, the new paper in this, but this is what a lot of the work that's been going on, especially at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, has been talking about these asymmetric brain activities that correspond to negative and positive emotions.
You're going to give me a complex now. I'm going to be
I
watching
know.
everybody's
I
left
know.
eye to see
I
if
know.
they believe me or not.
I know this knowledge is actually burdensome.
Yeah, I bet.
Running a podcast or any content operation is a grind. The editing, the clipping, the captions. It's enough to make anyone quit before the fun even starts. Enter Riverside. This tool is your content powerhouse. Forget decent quality virtual calls. Riverside gives you 4K video, pristine audio, and makes deadweight tasks disappear faster than bad ideas. Their text-based editor slashes, silences, and edits errors with one click. Needing some extra clips? Riverside's AI Magic Clips finds the moments people actually care about and delivers them to you. No guessing, no endless replays. And here's the kicker. You don't even need to record in the platform to use its features. You have the option to upload your footage to Riverside, letting it handle the heavy lifting. So you can save your brain power for the creative stuff. So stop drowning in edits, get busy creating, hit the link in the description, use code Cody, and thank me later.
That kind of takes me to this other idea I was wondering about for you, which is, when you wake up, I don't know, a lot of times I wake up in the morning and like one day I'm kind of happy. One day I'm not so happy. Do you think we can actually control our happiness, or is it out of our control?
We can manage our emotions. So you can't control your happiness directly, but you can manage your emotions, and you can adopt habits through proper understanding that will give you a greater frequency of emotional control and the emotions that are both appropriate to the situation and those that you choose, which is really important thing to do. So the whole point is I can't make myself happy all the time. Choose happiness. I see that on people's bumper stickers, and I feel like ramming my car into that. It's because, you need unhappiness, and your suffering is a very sacred thing. It's an incredibly important and beautiful thing, as a matter of fact. However, you can manage your emotions much, much more than you currently do. Almost everybody can. And the way to do that is by training your prefrontal cortex, which is the most human part of your brain. This is the bumper of tissue, 30% of your brain by weight behind your forehead. That's all of your conscious stuff is going on in that part of the brain. Training it to understand your limbic system and to react according to the way that you want to, as opposed to the way that you feel. Now, that's a whole set of techniques, self-management techniques called metacognition, which sounds really fancy, but just thinking about thinking. Real consciousness about your emotions and then reasoning about your emotions gives you unbelievable amounts of managerial control, where you can decide, I don't want that emotion because I don't think it's actually appropriate. I'm just feeling it because, I'm an animal. But I've decided that I'm not going to act according to it. You can choose gratitude over resentment. You can choose humor over sadness. You can do a lot of emotional substitution on the basis of this. You can also wait when you're feeling a negative emotion so you're not reactive. Your grandma probably said, Cody, count to 10 when you're angry, before you answer. She was telling you to be metacognitive. The reason is because you were letting your prefrontal cortex catch up. Your limbic system is fast, your prefrontal cortex is slow. Let your prefrontal cortex catch up, and you can manage a lot of your negative emotions, use them in an appropriate way, react the way that you want to. You'll get a lot happier.
So let's put that into practice. Let's say you're in a fight with your husband, totally hypothetical speaking.
Weird. I don't actually have a
100%.
husband, but so yeah.
I do. So let's say you're in a fight with your significant other, and you're mad, and your gut reaction is to go at them.
Right.
What is a practice to slow down anger or to control your mood?
Yeah. So there's a lot, almost any time that people give advice to couples, they're inadvertently giving them advice on metacognition. So for example, if you're quarreling a lot with your partner and you go to somebody who gives you advice on, one of the things that they'll say is, when you're having a quarrel or you're feeling really, really angry, say to your partner, I want to talk about this, but I don't want to talk about it right now because I'm really mad. That's called a hot hedonic state, or you have lots of strong negative emotions right now. I want to talk about it later. Can we talk about this after dinner? And you put a pin in it. And by the time you get there, you're in a cool hedonic state. You can actually talk about it, and you're highly metacognitive at that particular point. That's a way to do that. Another way to do it is when you're actually having an argument and your partner says something you don't like, you stop, you think about it, And then you say, is what you're trying to say, and then you paraphrase what your partner's just said. This has, all you've done is given yourself time to catch up to your own limbic system. You're not trying to placate your partner. You're trying to placate your limbic system is what it comes down to. You're being less animal and you're being more human. And these are all kinds of ways to do that.
That's so useful.
Yeah.
Also, I think there is something really nice about named frameworks. Like I could 1,000% see me talking to Chris and saying, I am on what did you call it? I'm hot hedonically?
I'm in a hot hedonic state right now.
I'm in a hot hedonic
He's like,
state right now.
he's like, awesome. Like,
Yeah.
no, it sounds good. It's not.
I'm excited about this.
Yeah.
Not great. That's really useful.
Yeah,
Oftentimes
totally.
I feel like therapy too is not specific enough as to pose, when you go, at least some of our therapists,
Right.
they give you these things that you should do. Like,
Right.
yeah, pause, take a breath. But if you back it up with the research and data, I at least find that I'm more likely to use it. I'm like, oh, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's actually me hijacking this. It's not about the other person. Let's not go all the way back to the first time that he did something wrong 17 years
Right.
ago.
Yeah, it's because you're a student and you actually want understanding. But most people get the best response from therapy when the therapy is a teacher to you about you. That's helping you to get a PhD in codiness, right? That's really important that you actually have this self-understanding. The more that you're learning about yourself from therapy, the more likely it is to have a beneficial impact over the long term. When somebody just wants to solve your problems or give you hacks, run the other way. That's just not very helpful, and it's certainly not enduring. Is how this works, and this is one of the reasons that I do the work that I do. I'm teaching people about themselves. That's what I really want. You want the secret to happiness? Understand yourself. Understand the science such that you can change your own habits and do so very, very aware and awake. And then the last part is most important, which is go teach it to others. The way that you get a happier world is by creating a generation of happiness teachers. That's my movement. That's what I really want to do.
Interesting.
Yeah, my class at Harvard is called Leadership and Happiness. And on the first day of class, I say, this is the first day in your elite training to become a happiness teacher like me. In business, because they're all MBAs. They're all going to run businesses. And they want to be managers, but great managers are teachers.
What is the secret to happiness?
So this there isn't a single secret to happiness, because happiness isn't just a thing that you flip a switch. You don't become happy. You could say that the secret to happiness is understanding the methods toward happierness. It's a whole lot of self-knowledge and a commitment to actually practice and live life in a different way is how it comes about. If there were a secret to happiness, we'd know it. I'd be selling it. It would be going like hotcakes on Amazon.
We'd be on your plane.
Yeah,
right
totally.
Now.
We would be doing
only
this on
do
my plane.
podcasts on your plane.
That's right. But I wouldn't have been the one to find it. It would have been found a long time ago. This is the thing that people think they want, and it's really, really elusive because there isn't a switch. Happiness is a multidimensional phenomenon that's not fundamentally, it's a combination. You and I have talked about this in the past, of enjoyment, satisfaction, and meaning, which is a whole vast literature and set of techniques. It's actually a journey. It's an incredible adventure. And that's how I see it. That's what I really want, is I want a generation of Americans who are suffering a lot to see it as an opportunity to actually make their hobby, their avocation, the search for happiness, around the science based on this, because it's so fun and interesting.
And you have said before that you actually are not natural state happy.
Yeah. That's actually why I got into this business in the first place. I'm a behavioral scientist, and for years and years I did work that I thought was useful. I mean, I did work on beauty, I did work on charity, but I found that I gravitated toward the big question that I had, which is, how can I be a happier person? It's me search as opposed to just research, because I come from gloomy stock, and about 50% of your baseline mood levels is genetic. We know this from identical twins that were separated at birth and given personality tests as twins at about age 40. There's tons of interesting papers on this, and you can even see these pairs of identical twins that didn't know they had twins and are reunited. It's on YouTube. It's a beautiful thing. And when they're given personality tests, it turns out that a lot of their personalities are genetic, including about half of their happiness. So their baseline mood level. And so, your mother literally made you unhappy. So you got to change your habits. And part of changing your habits is changing your knowledge. And for me, man, I suffered through a PhD in social science as a social scientist. So I got to use it for something that's really, really important for what the world really wants, starting with what I really want. And that's how I wound up in this business.
It's interesting because now that I've done the podcast and have been in the circles I've been for a minute, I've met a lot of professors.
Yeah.
They don't seem that happy on
Yeah.
average. I mean, I've said it to his face and we're buddies enough, so I think I can say it. Like, I remember having Scott Galloway on the podcast.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah.
God, you're exactly what I thought you were going to be. You are not a happy dude.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I'm baseline not happy. I'm like, will you laugh today on this? And he's like, probably not, because we've talked about it. And I was like, so all this stuff that you do, that you kind of make these self-deprecating jokes about, like, this is your steady state. It's kind of where you want to be. I was wondering, is there a connection or a correlation between intelligence and unhappiness? Are you smarter if you're smarter, are you more unhappy?
Yeah, no, there is, there actually isn't very much correlation at all between cognitive ability and happiness. There are some correlations with education and happiness and unhappiness. And so what you find is that people, when they get more education from high school through college, they tend to get happier. And part of the reason is because they have, their lives tend to be more equilibrated. They tend to have more opportunities. And so probably they're not getting happier. Probably they're eliminable sources of unhappiness, which is really what's going on. So their well-being is rising on the unhappiness side, not the happiness side. And then when people hang around graduate school for long enough, their unhappiness starts to rise again.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it might actually be a selection effect. You might find that a lot of people who are sort of discontented with the world, they tend to self-select into the graduate school environment, is what you find. But really happy people, one of the things that they do, they gravitate toward just opportunity. I bet more people are reading, Main Street Millionaire who are naturally happy people. Why? Because they're optimists. Optimists tend to be entrepreneurs. They're the people who see something much better in the future. Whereas, a lot of people, especially social scientists, they don't have an especially sunny view of human nature. They tend to think that everything is socially constructed. They tend to be very non-religious, and we find that non-religious people tend to be less happy than religious people because they don't think that there's something big and good and beautiful that lies in store for all of us if we live right. And so the result is that there isn't that kind of optimism that you typically see in probably the people that you're hanging around with a lot more.
That's fascinating because if you think about it, we've talked about this before with your dark triad and how a lot of our leaders today are dark triad, this narcissistic tendency and this sort of real pessimism mixed with darkness. And then if we have that same phenomenon happening with those we deem experts, aka academics, we've let some of the leaders and biggest minds that drive, I don't know, almost every decision we make in a society as connected as we are today, be driven by maybe pessimistic, unhappy people.
Well, certainly pessimists. There's a lot of pessimists in that. So there's two different phenomena that we're looking at here. So you refer to the dark triad, which is this combination of narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. In other words, it's all about me. I'm willing to hurt you, and I feel no remorse when I do. And if you're above average on those three, and there's really good tests, you can, on my website, you can take the test for the dark triad at arthurbrooks.com, totally free. Take it for a friend, take it for a potential romantic partner, right?
Yeah.
And if you're above average, which isn't to say that you're an axe murderer, but to be just above the population average across all three, then you're going to be in about 7% of the population. You'll be deemed a dark triad, which has certain characteristics that are just not favorable to leadership and not helpful to other people. I mean, don't work for one. Don't marry one. I mean, you don't want that is the way that works. And we have an environment these days where a lot of people in media and especially in politics are tending toward the dark triad. And for a series of weird cultural circumstances, we're rewarding them. They tend to be bullies. And the result is that even though we don't like bullies particularly, we like bullies on our side when we're afraid of the bullies on the other side. Mm-hmm. And so you go through these periods where dark triads are rewarded, especially if they're intelligent. We see that less among intellectuals. I don't know very many dark triads in academia. I actually don't see it very often.
Why?
But part of it is just it's harder to be rewarded under those circumstances because, megalomania in academia, where you're being rewarded by your colleagues and lifted up by others in tenure committees, and it's not an ecosystem that rewards that very much like politics, where politics. If this is the right moment and you're a maniac, you're going to win.
Yeah.
Right. But in academia, if you're a maniac, people are going to be like, no. But you can be pessimistic, to be sure. Now, in academia, there are lots of dark triads. They just don't happen to be faculty mostly. They're activists. Most of these, and there's a really interesting papers that we've seen recently, the dark triads, they're disproportionately social activists. These are people that want to fire up other people with anger and fear. I want to make you angry and afraid. I want you to be aggrieved. I want you to feel like a victim, because then I can conscript you into my war. And that's a classic dark triad move. So if you go on campuses or any place and you see people who are really shrill activists trying to tell young people that they should be afraid and they should be angry about whatever cause du jour that we're finding, you're very likely to find a dark triad at the head of that movement.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I think it's interesting some of the moves Elon is theoretically making for Twitter, trying to make it kinder. We'll see if that works. So far, so not good.
It's a very Wild West environment out there.
It is, but I think this is such a good barometer to have, because a lot of times, what do people say these days? Everybody's good. Are there bad people? No, they aren't. We're all just like trying to figure it out. We figure it out at different stages. And if I've seen one thing from being on the internet, is there are some really unhappy people who want you to be unhappy too.
For sure.
And you should just acknowledge that.
Tons of dark triads on social media in particular, and because it rewards dark triad behavior, it rewards anonymity, it rewards trolling, it rewards, actually it's more of a dark tetrad is what we find, which adds a fourth characteristic, which is sadism. And so when you get the motive behind it being, I want your pain, that's a really nasty business. And that's what we find a whole lot. And there's a very interesting paper called Trolls Just Want to Have Fun that talks about the fact that you tend to see psychopathic sadistic behavior in anonymous social media activity. So one of the things that people on a first date should do as a barometer of whether or not you're accidentally getting involved with a dark triad personality is to say, do you like to post anonymously on the internet? Because the answer is yes, you're overwhelmingly likely to be talking to a dark triad. You're overwhelmingly likely to be talking to a pathological personality, somebody who really likes to stir up trouble and hurt other people. And social media lends itself to that. So if you spend too much time on X or any of these platforms, you're going to think that the whole world's burning down. And the reason is because 7% of the population is overrepresented there. It's like the prison population. I heard one estimate that's hard for me to evaluate, that 85% of the prison population is dark triad. It's just that they tend to make really, really stupid decisions, and that's why, in hurting other people, they wind up in prison. They engage in criminal activity. Social media is like prison. That it's an overrepresentation of these pathological personalities that want to stir you up, hurt you, exploit you, take your stuff, make you mad, freak you out, whatever it happens to be.
And
so
they get off on it. It's
just
a wild
delete
thing.
the app. I recommend that everybody go on a social media cleanse very regularly, so you can understand that the ordinary world, the non-social media world, is actually pretty good.
And it's much more real.
It's real life.
Yeah.
And some people
100%.
actually don't want real life because it's so boring compared to prison.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is like a little heroin hit when you get on the internet.
Yeah. I've met people who spent 20, 30 years in prison and really struggle when they come out because real life is just so slow moving and boring. Wow. Yeah.
And they want to go back in.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
That's like somebody who can't stand to not be on X.
Yeah, I've met a few of them, actually. So let's say that you're a young person and you don't want to date a narcissist or a dark triad.
And you don't.
And you don't.
Unless you're a narcissist. Actually,
Right.
you want somebody who's not, because then you can exploit.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So how would you make sure that's not who you're dating? What are 3 or 4 things you could do?
Yeah. So I've written an awful lot about these particular characteristics, and I have screens and things that you should actually be paying attention to. But the whole point is understanding what that constellation actually is. So narcissists, especially narcissists who are also Machiavellian and somewhat psychopathic, they present unbelievably well. If you're getting love bombed by somebody, that's very likely a dark triad.
What is love bombing?
And that's basically moving on you super fast, sending you chocolates, sending you flowers. You know, it's just, I love you so much from the very beginning. If they're moving too quickly into the zone of trying to sweep you off your feet, that's always what dark triads do.
Why?
Because they show really well, and they prey. This is generally speaking a gendered phenomenon. So these are dark triad men do this.
Yep.
And they have almost a perfect detector for a syndrome called hemophilia in women, which is, it can happen to men too, but it's most likely women. Not hemophilia, which is a blood disorder. Hemophilia without the H, which is women who fall in love really quickly. And so, and it's a pretty common phenomenon. And there's a bunch of literature on this. And so dark triads, they have a sixth sense for hemophilic women. And they'll just love bomb them, and within a week be practically moving in together, and then draining their bank accounts and cheating on them, and and treating them really horribly. Knowledge is power. So I've worked with lots and lots of young women about this, talking to them about what you should be looking out for in yourself and in others. And we talk about the brain science of how this works. If you're hemophilic, you're going through this neurochemical cascade of falling in love much more quickly than the average person. So that cascade is, it starts off, the ignition starts with the sex hormones, with attraction, actually comes from testosterone and estrogen. Then this goes into the anticipation and euphoria phase, which is a lot about norepinephrine and dopamine. Then it goes into bonding to the other person, where serotonin levels fall. So a part of the brain called the ventrolateral prefrontal cortex becomes highly active. This is almost indistinguishable from clinical depression, because you're ruminating on the other person. This is when you send 100 text messages like a moron and feel humiliated.
Never
and
done
that's
that.
because when you're falling in love, you'll do weird stuff, and that's because your serotonin levels are low. And what you really want in the end is the imprinting, bonding on each other with oxytocin, which is this bonding hormone, also known as the love molecule. And you go through this process, and it usually takes a certain amount of time. And if you sync up in that and you're falling in love, it's great. But if you're going through this in hours and the other person is going through it in days and weeks, it's a problem. And if the other person isn't going through it at all, they're just trying to exploit you, it's a big problem unless you've got this knowledge, is what it comes down to. So recognizing the characteristics of narcissists is really important. They're going to be trying to sweep you off your feet. They're also, it's interesting because they have all these tells. Narcissists, everything's about them. Right? You know, the average number of questions asked by a man on a first date, according to my colleague Allison Woodbrooks at HBS, 0.
No way.
Yeah, that's the average. That's the median number of questions asked by a man on a first date with a woman. Yeah. So if on the second and third date you're still not getting any questions about you, you get a narcissist. That's a big tell.
That's a good one.
They're just not curious about you. Yeah. It's not like they were raised by wolves. They just literally don't care about you. And if you're the only one, if it's asymmetric in that way, and those types of things, if they're talking an awful lot about the people who've done bad things to them, if they have a persecution complex, if they tend to feel victimized, if you've noticed that they've moved around a lot because they haven't been able to hold a job, all of these are dark triad tells.
That's such good intel, especially the question part, because I think I had a few interactions with one in business and one in personal relationship. But the personal one, I remember being so enamored by the human, like very charismatic.
Totally. They show so well.
They show so well. And I think there was that love bombing thing going on. And then simultaneously, I was I was just like, wow, the stories you're telling and the things that have happened. And, oh, they did that to you? How could they have done that to you? And then if I look back, probably I didn't share much of anything.
Yeah. That's right.
So
that's right.
That's a great tell.
Totally. And when you think about it, what the narcissist wants you to fall in love with him.
Yeah.
Wants you